Chapter 533. Wu-Ming searched along the edge of the crater and soon found Maeve. After all, Wu-Ming could feel from the contract that Maeve was not hurt at all. That meant that she was not in the range of the explosion just now. At the very least, she was not hurt. Naturally, she was outside the crater. With Wu-Ming and Rama's acceleration, it was easy for them to go from the edge of the crater to the other side. It only took them a few minutes. At that moment, the celestial bull that was pulling Maeve's carriage had fallen to the ground. It seemed that it was affected by the explosion. The carriage that was originally gorgeous and dignified had become a little tattered. However, at least it did not seem to be damaged internally. Rama came to the front of the celestial bull and squatted down to check on the two celestial bulls. Wu-Ming was slightly stunned when he saw that. Then he recalled something. It seemed like Rama was quite a caring big boy. At that moment, Maeve suddenly flew out of the carriage. That's right. She flew out and landed in Wu-Ming's arms. Wu-Ming wondered how Maeve could fly into Wu-Ming's arms in a straight line. Wouldn't you fall because of gravity? Newton was about to cry. In short, Wu-Ming hugged Maeve, who was flying toward him. Little sigh, you're finally here. You almost couldn't see me. Maeve looked at Wu-Ming pitifully. Of course, if Maeve changed her smile into a cry, the effect would be better. This must be your wife, Cylinder. I'm really envious. Romo stood up and looked at the couple who were hugging each other lovingly. He was filled with emotion. Rama was naturally envious of the couple who could be together. It was unlike him and Sito, who could not see each other because of the curse. However, Wu-Ming was very helpless. How could you tell that this was a loving hug? It was obviously my Fu who suddenly flew out, and I subconsciously hugged her, okay? However, since he had accepted Maeve, a hug was nothing. Asterisk cough cough asterisk. Speaking of which, Maeve, what's going on here? Wu-Ming asked. On the other hand, Rama was all ears. After all, such a huge explosion was very attractive. This is what happened. Maeve began to tell the story. After Fergus broke the city gate, Hector left while Hercules appeared. Finn and Dilmaud held Hercules back. However, Spartacus appeared and Fergus and Spartacus went against each other. Maeve, of course, was to watch the battle. Following that, there was no progress in the battle between Hercules, Finn, and Dilmaud. It was just a back-and-forth exchange of blows. Although Finn and Dilmaud couldn't defeat Hercules in a one-on-one fight, the two of them were able to fight Hercules to a draw for the time being. As for the battle between Fergus and Spartacus, it was a one-sided battle. Wu-Ming felt that something was wrong. He knew the effect of Spartacus' noble phantasm. Soon after, Fergus saw that Spartacus was getting more and more spirited as he fought. Spartacus had transformed into a 5-meter-tall monster. Moreover, he was still transforming into a monster. Fergus decided to activate his relic immediately. Then, Spartacus exploded. Wu-Ming shook his head bitterly. As expected, nothing good ever came out of this guy's capture. Rama tilted his head awkwardly. It was his fault. However, the young Rama King would never admit his mistake. Asterisk cough cough asterisk. As Maeve was the furthest away and had the protection of the ox cart, she was not hurt. However, the two divine bulls were in trouble. These two divine bulls were not Achilles' immortal horses. Now, all their bones were broken and they were about to leave the stage. Fortunately, it was a noble phantasm, so they did not have to worry too much about it. After Wu-Ming and Rama arrived, Maeve removed the noble phantasm. The divine bulls and the ox cart turned into mana particles and disappeared. Is Berserker's noble phantasm that powerful? Rama asked. It was normal for a powerful heroic spirit to have a powerful noble phantasm. However, Spartacus was just a rebellious gladiator. To put it bluntly, he was just a rebellious slave. Moreover, he was a slave who did not succeed in his rebellion and was quickly executed. No matter how one looked at it, such a person should not have such a powerful noble phantasm. He might be an exception. However, I've seen his noble phantasm before. Even if it exploded, it wouldn't be this powerful. Wu-Ming put Maeve down from his arms, ignoring her dissatisfied expression. Then, Wu-Ming looked at the lake behind him that was about to be filled. However, with Master's 3 command incantations and Fergus Noble Artifact charging Spartacus, it's not hard to imagine how much damage it could cause. Although almost 100 square kilometers was huge, if Karna and Wuming were to fight, thousands of square kilometers of land could be affected. That was also the reason why Wuming had asked Karna and Zhou to fight in the northwest part of the Cordillera Mountains. There were fewer people there, and it was far away from the battlefield. Otherwise, they would be affected by the battle. Command spells. Noble Phantasm, charging. Rama and Maeve repeated Wuming's words. That's right. Wuming nodded his head. Spartacus Noble Phantasm, Crashing Warmonger, is a permanent Noble Phantasm. It can convert the damage it receives into mana and store it in its body. It can increase its ability value and change its body. Finally, when a mana is full, it will self-destruct and launch a destructive impact. After explaining, Wuming paused and thought for a while. I think Demetrius must have used the command incantation to give the command to unleash the greatest power of the Noble Phantasm 3 times. It strengthened Spartacus' Noble Phantasm. In addition to Fergus' continuous attacks and the overcharging of Spartacus' Noble Phantasm, it caused Spartacus to reach the critical point and self-destruct before it could transform into a monster. Rama and Maeve thought for a while and realized that this was the most suitable explanation for the current situation. However, I think Fergus' Noble Phantasm had a huge impact on the situation here. Maeve smiled. What do you mean? Wuming asked. Maeve then told Wuming about the neon sword that seemed to have been infused with all its power. Does that mean it's the same as Ibaraki Duji? Wuming touched his chin. It seems like they've all left the battlefield. Needless to say, Fergus was the closest to Spartacus and was designated to leave the battlefield. As for Finn, Dilmund, and even Hercules, they had spent a lot of time repairing their bodies. It was likely that the 2 of them had also been forced out of the battlefield during the explosion. Don't we need to care about Hercules? Rama asked. He knew that Wuming did not kill Hercules. He only tied Hercules up and buried him. Don't worry about that guy for now. He's no different from leaving the battlefield. Wuming waved his hand. After all, it was not easy for Hercules to break free from the pseudo-skylock that was almost the same as the real skylock. Just when Wuming was about to check on Achilles, a dark purple ripple suddenly appeared. Chapter 534. The portal has been activated? Wuming was shocked. That's right, this was Wuming's portal. There's no time to explain. Come in quickly, Wuming said as he rushed into the portal. That's right, he rushed in. It was obvious how anxious Wuming was. Romo seemed to have thought of something and quickly rushed in as well. Maeve looked at the 2 of them rushing in. She blinked her eyes and walked in gracefully. Then, the portal closed. After passing through the portal and arriving on the other side, Maeve found herself in the belly of a ship. Then, a rather strange scene appeared before Maeve's eyes. Wuming was holding the Holy Grail in one hand and a spear in the other. He placed the spear on the neck of a yellow-haired guy whose face was pale with fright. Next to the yellow-haired guy was a girl with pinkish-purple hair. She was holding a magic wand with a nervous expression. The beast-eared girl with green hair was aiming an arrow at the girl's head. If the girl with the magic wand made any strange movements, Maeve believed that the beast-eared girl's arrow would definitely pierce through her head. Behind Wuming was Romo. However, at this moment, Romo was holding a girl who looked almost exactly like him. Rama's face was filled with nervousness as he kept calling out names like Cedo, Cedo. However, from the looks of it, Romo seemed to be unable to see the girl at all. He was like a blind person who could only rely on touch. However, from the looks of it, there seemed to be a problem with Romo's perception. Although on the surface, Romo could accurately touch Cedo, at this moment, Romo gave off the feeling that he was touching air. As for the girl who seemed to be called Cedo, she was already unconscious. This made my Fu daydream. If that girl was me, would Xiao Sai be as anxious as she is? This was a girl's heart. However, Wuming was not paying attention to Maeve at the moment and did not know what she was thinking. Wuming was only paying attention to the yellow-haired guy. In any case, You're someone who entered the martyr's palace. Can't you have a little backbone? With that, Wu Ming rubbed the tip of his spear on Aisen's neck. However, Wu Ming's result was Aisen's howl. Squeak, squeak. Aisen's face turned pale, and his hands were still trembling. Don't kill me, Aisen said in a trembling voice. Looking at Aisen in such a state, Medea or Lily looked at Aisen with worry and disappointment. Sir Aisen, after seeing such a traitorous witch, Wu Ming finally understood why Medea, who was abandoned by Aisen, would choose to follow him again. Because Medea was in the form of a girl's dream of a girl. Wu Ming shook his head. A guy like that was not worth his time. However, Wu Ming still did not lower the tip of his spear from Aisen's neck. Then, Wu Ming turned to look at Rama. Rama, can't you sense Sito? Wu Ming frowned. Although he had learned about the so-called curse from Rama, he did not expect the curse to be so powerful. Now, not to mention not being able to see, even the contact between the two of them, and even their own perception had become erroneous. This curse of never being together was not just for show. He did not know how a female monkey could place such a curse on Rama and Sito. That's right. Even if Sito and I were to hug each other, we would not be able to see or sense each other. Rama no longer referred to himself as you. At this moment, Rama was like a person who was chasing after hope. In the end, he realized that the hope was despair. Once Sito and I get too close, one of our powers and presence will gradually fade until they leave. Tears rolled down Rama's cheeks. As for which party would disappear, there was no doubt that it would be the weaker party. Wu Ming recalled the scene when he came back through the portal released by Atlanta. At that time, Sito was not restrained by any chains. However, there was no guarantee that Medea's magic did not restrict her. However, even so, Sito could not stand up at that time, as if she was severely injured. At that time, Wu Ming sensed that Sito's magic power was insufficient, or rather, it was severely lacking. At this moment, looking at the many injuries on Sito's body, as well as the faintly discernible signs of his spirit base disappearing, how could Wu Ming not know what was going on? From being imprisoned on Alcatraz Island to this Argo. Until now, Sito had been in a state of abuse. That we did not do anything to Miss Sito. Please believe us. Lord Aisen only wanted to use Miss Sito as a hostage, Medea said weakly. If that was the case, the injuries on Sito's body were caused before he was captured on Argo. It was not unreasonable. It was common for the Celts to beat people half to death when they captured them, and they did not have the habit of healing their captives. In other words, Beowulf did not know how to heal at all, and he did not realize that he should heal Sito. In short, that guy was dead. Let's not care about him. Then, Wu Ming felt that something was wrong. Medea was the disciple of the goddess of magic, Hecate. She had many healing methods, so why didn't she heal Sito? However, Medea seemed to have seen through Wu Ming's question and answered it in advance. Miss Sito has always refused me to heal her, and she said something like, even if I die, I don't want to be a burden to Lord Rama. As if recalling the scene when Sito said those words, Medea was a little depressed. She also wanted to sacrifice herself for the people she loved like Sito did. But Aisen, while Medea was distracted, Wu Ming frowned in distress. However, he began to laugh bitterly in his heart. So, if the other party did not want to heal, wouldn't you forcefully heal her? How gentle are you? However, if I didn't see wrongly, Aisen wanted to use Sito and the Holy Grail to summon the demon god Pillar. Wu Ming narrowed his eyes and looked at Aisen, who was so frightened that he could not speak. When Wu Ming said those words, Rama instantly raised his head with anger in his eyes. Rama was slower than Wu Ming by a bit. When he arrived, Wu Ming had already seized the Holy Grail and restrained Aisen and Medea with Atlanta. It was also Rama's arrival that caused the extremely weak Sito to fall into a coma. Following Wu Ming's instructions, Rama stumbled and found Sito through Sito's position that was left in his eyes. However, it did not work. Rama could not see Sito at all, nor could he touch Sito. However, he did not give up and kept calling out Sito's name. How could a man who loved his wife not be enraged when he found out that his wife had almost been used as a sacrifice? Bang! Chapter 535. Bang! Wuming moved his spear away from Isen's neck and blocked Rama's indestructible blade. Under the blade of the indestructible blade was Isen, who was paralyzed on the ground. However, Demetrius, who made a little movement, was stopped by Atlanta's arrows. Calm down, Rama. Wuming tried to persuade Rama gently. You want me to calm down? The guy who almost turned Cedo into a demon god pillar is right in front of me. How can I calm down? Rama's eyes were burning with flames as he stared at Isen fiercely, as if he wanted to eat Isen alive. We are friends, right? If so, listen to my advice. Isen is still useful, so don't kill him for the time being. Otherwise, Wuming, who had already snatched the Greek Holy Grail, would have already made his move. Rama looked at Wuming and nodded. He then continued to stare at Isen fiercely. Maeve, please do me a favor. Wuming waved at Maeve, who looked like she was watching a family drama. Yes. Maeve smiled and came to Wuming's side. After that, Wuming took out a lot of healing potions from his precious artifact space. He then opened the teleportation door and let Maeve bring Cedo away for the time being. After all, if Cedo stayed with Rama any longer, he would disappear soon. After Wuming told Maeve about various things, Maeve carried Cedo into the teleportation door. Thank you very much, Holy King. No, surrender. Rama said sincerely to Wuming. It was an eye-opener for Wuming to be able to make the proud and arrogant Rama, who often threw tantrums, apologize so sincerely. Since you were able to call me by my name, it means that we are friends, right? As he spoke, Wuming placed the Holy Grail into the golden ripple under Isen's gaze. He then extended his hand to Rama. Although Wuming treated Rama as a friend when Reeve shook hands with Rama, he did not expect that. Yes, that's right, my friend. Then, Rama and Wuming held each other's hands tightly. Then, don't attack Isen for the time being, all right? Wuming glanced at Isen, causing Isen to shuffle backwards in fright. After all, Isen was currently sitting on the ground. Sure, after all, this person had saved his wife, Sidwa. Moreover, this person was also his friend. Thus, Rama would naturally listen to him. As Rama spoke, he glared at Isen and no longer looked at him. Otherwise, the anger in his heart would not dissipate. Although Rama had promised Wuming to spare Isen's life for the time being, he wasn't the kind of person who would forgive someone who almost sacrificed his wife. It was also because of Wuming's face. Otherwise, even if Gadatsi was here with Rama's childish temper, he would have used the indestructible blade to slash Isen. Yes, the kind that even their own mother wouldn't be able to recognize. So, Isen, now you are our captive. Wuming smiled and narrowed his eyes, which made Isen and even Demetrius feel a chill. In the sky, the Argo was moving towards Alexandria. On the Argo, Isen was controlling the Argo alone at the helm. If one didn't look at Isen's livid face and Atlanta behind him, who was holding the heavenly bow and staring at Isen as if he was her prey, then Isen's situation was not that bad. Demetrius, who was originally following Isen, was at the bow with Wuming and Rama, explaining the current situation of the Greek side. In short, after sending out Hercules, Hector, and the captive Spartacus, we only have Isen, Atlanta, and me left. Wuming did not look at Demetrius. He just looked ahead as if he was experiencing the feeling of flying in a boat. As for Rama, he sat cross-legged alone on the deck behind Wuming and Demetrius with his eyes closed, as if everything had nothing to do with him until they reached their destination, Alexandria. This was Wuming's purpose. Through Isen, he drove the Argo to Gadatsi and others' gathering place, Alexandria. At this moment, only Rome was left on this continent, and it was now being restrained by Gadatsi and others. This time, the battle against Greece was also messed up because of Spartacus' self-destruction. Although Finn, Dilmund, and Fergus had all left the stage, Silent Noise had taken the opportunity to imprison Hercules. She had also captured Isen and Demetrius, so overall, it was still a good outcome. As for Achilles and Hector, Wu Ming did not disturb them, just like he did not disturb Karna and Ajo. Now, as long as he got the Holy Grail of Rome, this singularity would be over. With that in mind, Wu Ming let out a long sigh as he looked at the clouds in the sky. At this moment, because Wu Ming and Rama did not reply, Demetrius waited there. Because waiting was boring, Demetrius would look at Ison from time to time, but every time, she would turn her head away in an instant. She was very nervous. She should be afraid of being misunderstood by Wu Ming and Rama. However, how could Wu Ming and Rama not notice it? Ahem, I already know the specific situation. Wu Ming clenched his fist and put it on his mouth and coughed. This scared little Maidea so much that she trembled and almost cried. Don't worry, I won't do anything to Ison. Wu Ming shook his head helplessly, trying to calm Demetrius down. But, you cast such a vicious curse on Sir Ison. As she spoke, Demetrius looked like she was about to cry. Isn't it obvious? Wu Ming said with a bitter smile. I don't believe that Ison will be obedient. After all, he's a hero who can leave his name in a martyr's palace. Although Ison was weak, at least he was invincible when it came to piloting a ship. It could be seen from the fact that Wu Ming did not feel the slightest tremor when he stood at the bow of the ship. Moreover, the existence that could be chosen by the two great restraints and dragged into the martyr's palace, regardless of whether it was a hero or an anti-hero, would definitely not be the same as ordinary people. Wu Ming could not be sure if Ison would betray him or do something else when Wu Ming and the others attacked Rome. Therefore, Wu Ming planted a lot of complicated Lune Rune tactics in Ison's body. Then, he told Demetrius and Ison that as long as Wu Ming willed it, Ison would experience what it meant to be in a living hell. Because what he said was true, Ison and Demetrius believed him. Moreover, when Wu Ming planted those complicated Lune Rune tactics, Demetrius was beside him. No matter how much Ison cried and howled, Ison, who was being held down by Rama, had his body implanted with those tactics in front of Demetrius, who was being watched by Atlanta. However, Wu Ming did not know anything about curses, nor did he study them. So, what he said was a complete lie. However, no matter who saw those extremely complicated and mysterious Lune Rune tactics, they would not doubt Wu Ming's words. In the eyes of others, it was an extremely vicious curse. As long as you are obedient, nothing will happen. Wu Ming looked at Demetrius with a smile. Demetrius could only nod helplessly. After all, they could not defeat Wu Ming and the others. Chapter 536. Since Rama used him as a laborer, Ison's sailing speed was still very fast. Wu Ming estimated that it would only take about 10 minutes to reach Alexandria. Demetrius, who had been staying beside Wu Ming, spoke hesitantly. What's wrong? Wu Ming looked at Demetrius and asked, Just tell me what you want to know. There's no need to beat around the bush. After that, Demetrius took a deep breath and asked the question. Excuse me, the purplish black hole just now, was it a teleportation magic? Wu Ming was stunned for a moment before he realized what she meant. The purplish black hole that Demetrius was referring to was undoubtedly the teleportation door that Wu Ming came to the Argo. That's a magic trick that I learned from the other world. It's called gate. Gate? Demetrius repeated the word as she pondered. The effect is that based on the place that I've been to or the place that I've seen, I can create a teleportation door anywhere. Wu Ming briefly explained how to use the gate. Anywhere. Demetrius was obviously shocked. Pay attention to the premise. It must be a place that I've been to or the place that I've seen. Wu Ming knocked Demetrius's little head. This scene was extremely similar to a teacher scolding a disobedient student. Whoa, but even so, it's still very powerful, Demetrius exclaimed as she hugged her little head and cried. Then, are there any side effects or other disadvantages? Demetrius raised her little hand. At this moment, she was also super interested in magic. There are no side effects at all. Well, if there's a disadvantage, it's that it can't be instantly teleported. Wu Ming looked at Demetrius with a perfect smile. At this moment, Demetrius's little head was filled with question marks. After all, you have to open the teleportation door first and then walk in. If you use this trick in a direct battle, it would definitely be useless. Also, if you use this skill in battle, if you can't close it in time, the enemy can also go through the portal. After all, Demetrius could only teleport by herself. That way, she would not be able to bring the enemy along with her. You're exaggerating. Even if that's the case, the magic you've learned from the other world is already very powerful. As long as you've been to a place before, or even a place as far as your eyes can see, it's really a powerful magic trick. Demetrius was slightly dazed. Indeed, this other world's magic is indeed very powerful. Either it's impossible to use it at all, but once you learn it, not only is the mana consumption low, but you can also move many people. It's much more useful than ordinary spatial magic. That's amazing, Medea said enviously. Do you want to learn? Wuming suddenly asked when he saw the envious look on Medea's face. Is it really possible? Demetrius shouted excitedly. Of course. You're not Ison. I have a good impression of you. Wuming was right. Such a naive little princess. Because Ison went to the palace of the beauty goddess to make a wish, she fell in love with Ison and her life was ruined. Regarding this, Wuming naturally did not mind teaching her the portal. Of course, the prerequisite was that Demetrius could learn it. But we're still enemies. Demetrius began to hesitate. It has to be said that even if she had the reputation of a traitor witch, the current Demetrius was undoubtedly an obedient and sensible princess. Because of the hostile relationship between the two of them, she was worried about whether Wuming teaching her magic tricks would be inappropriate. She was really a cute little princess. With the current situation, do you think we can still be considered enemies? Wuming teased. Indeed. Now we're captives. Demetrius smiled awkwardly. Then, are you willing to learn this magic trick from me, Demetrius? Wuming looked at Demetrius with great respect. Yes, I'm willing, teacher. Demetrius gripped her staff tightly with a serious expression. At this moment, Ison seemed to have been removed from Demetrius's mind. Demetrius only wanted to learn the portal magic trick. Then let us begin. Immediately after, a strange scene appeared on the deck. Wuming and Demetrius stood facing each other with their eyes closed. Wuming's hand was placed on Demetrius's head. Both of them did not move at all. This piqued Rama's interest. My friend, what are you doing? However, Wuming did not immediately answer Rama. After a moment, Wuming opened his eyes and put down his hand on Demetrius's head. It's just a simple memory sharing magic trick. After all, it's more efficient this way. All right. Actually, it was Wuming who did not know how to teach. Even he himself used the game scroll to learn the portal magic trick. However, it was not impossible to reverse the process. However, Wuming had never thought of teaching anyone, and no one had asked Wuming. Therefore, Wuming did not research on how to teach others the portal magic trick. After reading the nameless spellbook for a period of time, Wuming did not look at it anymore. It was fine as long as they could use it. Moreover, Wuming did not dare to guarantee that people from other worlds could learn the magic trick of the game Yggdrasil. Wuming also chose to teach Demetrius this magic trick because she was a little girl who was passionate about magic. Without any ambiguity, Wuming and Demetrius' relationship was only that of a teacher and student. Rama did not say anything else. After all, he did not know much about magic and was not very interested in it. Therefore, he walked to the bow of the ship and looked at the scenery. As for Wuming, he looked at Demetrius, who still had her eyes closed. At that moment, Wuming's heart was filled with anticipation. Could the magic trick of the game Yggdrasil be learned by the miraculous hero spirit of this world? Wuming was very curious. After about 10 seconds, Demetrius opened her eyes. Her eyes were as beautiful as gemstones. His eyes were brimming with excitement and joy. The result was obvious. From the looks of it, you should have learned teleportation gate. Right, Demetrius? Wuming smiled at Demetrius, pleased. Yes, teacher. I have successfully learned this magic trick. Demetrius shouted excitedly like a small animal. Thank you very much, teacher. Demetrius bowed deeply to Wuming to express her gratitude. For Demetrius, who was very interested in magic, Being able to learn the magic trick of another world was a great favor. Just as Wu Ming wanted to say something, Rama, who was at the bow of the ship, spoke. What? Chapter 537. My friend, come and see that, Romo said to Wu Ming while pointing in a certain direction. Wu Ming, who reacted, felt that he didn't need to look because the chilling magic power had been transmitted to him. But even so, Wu Ming continued to shift his gaze in the direction that Romo was pointing at. This place was a few kilometers north of Alexandria City. It could be said that they had not completely arrived at Alexandria City. At the location of Alexandria City, a behemoth appeared at this moment. A huge meat pillar that reached the sky, countless eyes that were constantly twisting, and a huge magic power that belonged to the demon god. Demon god pillar. Wu Ming narrowed his eyes. There was no doubt that it was the demon god pillar summoned by the Holy Grail of Rome. Could it be that Sharon and the others had forced Rome into a corner? Otherwise, why would the other party casually summon the demon god pillar? Or could it be that Rome's forces were already on the verge of collapse? If that was the case, it was not unimaginable that they would be forced to sacrifice the demon god pillar. Wu Ming pondered. But this has confirmed that Rome was indeed defeated by Greece. At this moment, the Argo suddenly stopped. Huh? Wu Ming turned to look at Ison, who was at the helm. However, at this moment, Ison was squatting on the ground with his head in his hands. Even when Atlanta pointed her bow at him, he did not get up. With a sudden jump, Wu Ming came to the helm. What's going on? This guy suddenly doesn't dare to go forward anymore. Atlantis stared at Ison with disgust. Ison, on the other hand, ignored Atlanta's angry glare, as if he would rather die with his corpse intact. Ison, it seems that you know what that is. Wu Ming looked at Ison with interest. Of course I know. That's the demon god pillar. If we go there, we'll just be throwing our lives away. Moreover, we won't even have a complete corpse. I don't want to go there. Ison's face was pale, but he still shouted loudly at Wu Ming. Indeed, although Wu Ming basically cut down the demon god pillars like vegetables, that was only because Wu Ming's authority was powerful. Basically, every time Wu Ming got rid of a demon god pillar, he would use his authority. After all, demon gods were still gods. The authority obtained from killing gods was especially effective against demon gods. However, even if the demon god pillar was frequently destroyed by Wu Ming, it was undeniable that the demon god pillar possessed the supreme power of a demon god. It could be said that ordinary servants, or even first-class servants, could not defeat a demon god pillar, and the same was true for some of the top servants. Of course, unless one had a special relic or skill, only those who had reached Karna's level would be able to fight against the demon god pillars. As for the servants who were currently in Alexandria, even if Sharon was there was nothing they could do. Wu Ming suddenly thought of someone. If it's that vampire, he might have the power to defeat the demon god pillar. Although Pamilia was a monster and classified as an anti-hero, it was undeniable that the vampire had her own principles and restrictions. If there was a word to describe it, it would be aristocrat. If there was a word to add, it would be mysterious. After all, there was no record of such a vampire from anywhere. However, it was precisely because of this that Wu Ming felt that the other party had the means to deal with the demon god pillar. One must know that keeping a mysterious might not work in other worlds, but in the X-Moon world, it was a universal pass. In short, Wu Ming felt that the other party had that kind of ability. However, even if that was the case, Wu Ming could not choose not to take action. In that case, you stay here alone, we will go there ourselves. Without forcing Ison, Wu Ming took Atlanta away and went to meet with Romo. Before leaving, Atlanta once again stared at Ison fiercely, which scared Ison again. Without caring about Ison, Wu Ming found Demetrius. Since Ison is not willing to go, then Demetrius, you will send us there, Wu Ming said with a smile. Hey, me? Demetrius was a little panicked. After all, at the moment, her spirit base was still that of an innocent little girl. Such a solemn task could be said to be quite difficult for her. Didn't you learn the magic I taught you? Now is the time to test you Demetrius, open the place where your eyes can reach." Wu Ming pointed to the direction of the demon god pillar. When Wu Ming said that, Demetrius was stunned. "That's right, this is the time to test my results." Immediately afterward, under Wu Ming's encouraging eyes, Demetrius nodded heavily. "Yes, I will work hard, teacher." Immediately afterward, Demetrius closed her eyes and began to activate the teleportation gate magic, or rather, magic. Wu Ming directly shared his memories and feelings of using the teleportation gate with Demetrius. Since Demetrius had confidently said that she had learned it, then she must have learned it. Wu Ming did not think that as a famous magician of the gods, Demetrius would deliberately deceive him because she could not learn such magic. As a result, as expected, gate. Demetrius opened her eyes, raised her magic wand, and shouted. Immediately afterward, a pinkish-purple ripple as tall as a person appeared in front of Wu Ming and the other two. Atlanta and Romo looked at the pinkish-purple ripple with an indescribable expression. This made Demetrius blush instantly. Why? The pinkish-purple ripple filled the heart of a young girl. Hey! However, Wu Ming could only helplessly smile bitterly. This was really in line with Demetrius's character. Well done, Demetrius. You are indeed my disciple. After all, the necessary praise could not be lacking. Yes, thank you for your praise, teacher. After hearing her teacher's praise, Demetrius's face changed from red to normal. Although the color was a little strange, it was obvious that Demetrius had successfully released the teleportation gate. After nodding to Atlanta and Romo, the two walked into the teleportation gate. Then, Wu Ming looked at Demetrius. If possible, I really don't want my excellent disciple to fall into the hands of that guy. That guy was undoubtedly referring to Ison. But teacher, I am deeply in love with Lord Ison now. Demetrius did not care about Wu Ming's words. Instead, she showed a faint smile. Forget it. As long as you are happy, my disciple. Wu Ming shook his head with a smile and walked into the teleportation gate. I wish you good luck, teacher. Demetrius prayed silently. Chapter 538. In the city of Alexandria, which had become a battlefield, there were ruins everywhere. And under the ruins, there were many residents who lived in the city. Compared to Greece, Celtic, and even Japan, Rome could be described as a force that was incomparably generous to civilians. After all, it was Rome, so it was not surprising. In this way, many residents would choose to live in the safest capital. Those people who were crushed under the ruins were such existences. However, the demon god pillar did not care about the life and death of those people. In other words, these residents would be attacked indiscriminately like the servants. Of course, the premise was that the servants didn't do anything. Matthew effortlessly lifted a stone slab that was pressing on a woman. Gadotsi quickly went up and helped the woman up. Are you okay? I will take you to a safe place. Gadotsi said eagerly. Child, my child, the woman said weakly, looking at the collapsed house. Gadotsi and Matthew could not bear to look at the woman. The possibility of a baby being crushed under such a collapsed house was almost zero. However, as if there was a temporary traffic jam in the underworld, the baby did not lose his life. Wah, wah, as if he heard the voice of his mother, a baby's cry came. My child. The woman wanted to rush to the ruins to save her child. However, she was seriously injured, and after leaving Gadotsi's support, she directly collapsed to the ground. Are you okay? Don't worry, we will save you, child. Gadotsi quickly supported the woman who collapsed to the ground. Then Gadotsi nodded to Matthew. Matthew was stunned, nodded, and was ready to save the child. Human life is so strong and beautiful. Matthew smiled and thought. Then a tentacle suddenly stretched out, or rather, smashed down. The target seemed to be Gadotsi. Matthew naturally quickly came to Gadotsi's side and blocked the attack with a shield. After Matthew came to Gadotsi's side, Gadotsi's wrist suddenly made a sound. Matthew, its target is the child. As if confirming the voice's words, the The tentacle dramatically and strangely changed its direction, and its target was the ruins where the baby's cry came from. No! The child's mother screamed at the top of her lungs, trying to stop the tentacles. However, it all happened so fast that Gadotsi, the woman, and even Matthew were powerless to stop it. Matthew did not expect the tentacles to be so strange. Using Gadotsi as bait, he forced Matthew to change the formation. As a result, his target became the baby under the ruins. Just like that, the tentacle fell towards the baby. Just as the tentacle was about to fall, a voice sounded in Mashu's and Gudazi's ears. Brahmastra, indestructible Rakshasa. In an instant, the indestructible blade spun with thunder and hit the tentacle. The tentacle was sent flying with an indescribable sound that sounded like a scream. The powerful and perfectly controlled power did not hurt the ruins below when it sent the tentacle flying. Taking advantage of this moment, Matthew went directly to the place where the baby was crying. He used his magic to gently clean up the ruins, revealing the cute child who was miraculously alive in the corner. Although the baby was still crying, it was indeed a symbol of life in everyone's eyes. Great! Matthew quickly picked up the baby, came to the woman, and handed the baby to the woman, the baby's mother. Thank you, my child, my child. After hurriedly thanking Gadotsi and Matthew, the woman held her child and kept talking. The indestructible blade flew back after sending the tentacle monkey flying. Matthew looked at the person in surprise. It's really Mr. Rama. It was Rama's noble phantasm that sent the tentacle flying. But Gadotsi was concerned about another thing. In other words, Assassin is also here. Gadotsi looked around, but she did not find any trace of Wuming. At this time, looking at Gadotsi, who was searching around, Rama spoke. Don't look for him, my friend is not here. Then, Gadotsi's little face looked like she was crying. How could this be? On the other side, Sharon and the other so-called main battle servants were in charge of attacking. Why dash? Why Elizabeth jumped and dodged a huge tentacle attack. How rude. How could you treat a lady like this? While Elizabeth patted the dust on her dress with lingering fear and said with dissatisfaction, Miss, what time is it now? Do you still care about those things? Robin Hood complained, rolled, and fired a few useless shots at the huge demon god pillar not far away. Take care of yourself, Green Rat. While Elizabeth shouted at Robin Hood angrily. Robin Hood could only helplessly take a few steps back, a look of discomfort on his face. Then, the blue and white flame flew past Elizabeth's hair. Why Elizabeth screamed in fear. Do you want to kill me? Why Elizabeth touched her hair and looked at Kaioheim with tears in her eyes. Sure enough, your lizard is useless. Kaioheim did not answer why Elizabeth directly, but released the flame at the demon god pillar while mocking Elizabeth. Of course, Kaioheim's attack was not very effective. Do you want to fight, fire-breathing snake? Elizabeth stared at Kaioheim fiercely. Come on, I'm not afraid of you. And Kaioheim also stared back at Elizabeth. Sigh. Robin Hood sighed helplessly. This is a battlefield, young missus. The enemy is a demon god pillar. Take it easy. Even if they seriously deal with the demon god pillar, it won't have any effect. Billy Boy, who suddenly appeared, pressed his hat, and his face was full of helplessness. After hearing Billy Boy's words, Robin Hood also showed a helpless smile. As a servant, their spiritual base was too low, and they couldn't cause damage to the demon god pillar. They couldn't even attract or restrain it. Only a few tentacles attacked them, and they were the waterproof kind, because the other tentacles were attacking Sharon. Geronimo, who was following behind Billy Boy, frowned helplessly and looked to the north. I hope the second team can complete the mission smoothly. Then they could support them. Then, Geronimo saw the lightning that represented the indestructible blade and smiled. They're coming. Chapter 539. On the so-called head-on battlefield, Karong transformed into a centaur, attacking the demon god pillars with his bow in the midst of the mechanical infantry. Sharon was able to hit the demon god pillar's eyes with his skills. Why was it only at the beginning? It was because the demon god pillar was no fool and knew how to defend. Karen retreated slightly, and countless mechanical infantry rushed towards the demon god pillar. However, the demon god pillar only needed to use a few dozen tentacles to directly blow up the mechanical infantry that were attacking it. This is a disaster. Edison roared as he hugged the lion's head behind the countless mechanical infantry soldiers. So noisy, be quiet. But at Madame Blavatsky's snarl, Edison obediently held his tongue. If this continues, we will be wiped out. Sharon frowned and came to the two to see if they could come up with a plan. The three looked at Nightingale, who was charging with the mechanical soldiers but was constantly being pushed back. They felt helpless and relieved. If not for Nightingale's stubborn personality, she would not have attracted the demon god pillar. After all, it was a berserker. However, if this continues, something will happen to Miss Nightingale. Helena looked worriedly at Nightingale, who was constantly spinning and jumping under the demon god pillar's tentacles and was sent flying again. As if toying with Nightingale, the demon god pillar did not use its full strength. Although it seemed like the demon god pillar's attacks were ineffective, Sharon and the others noticed that the demon god pillar was going easy on them. Otherwise, it would not have the time to attack Matthew and the others. If we look at the worst-case scenario, this demon god pillar might be smarter than we thought. Helena frowned as if she was facing a great enemy. I have a bad feeling. I feel like the demon god pillar is waiting for something. Karen's face darkened. This way, the demon god pillar was definitely scheming something. Edison was like a lion and did not understand the conversation between the two. At this moment, a voice resounded through the sky. A gigantic spear of light that had never appeared before came from afar and hit the demon god pillar. The demon god pillar let out an unrecognizable voice. It was obvious that the noble artifact's owner had poured a huge amount of magic into this attack. The noble artifact was released. That was the Holy King's voice. Edison said as he looked around for Wu Ming. Over there, Sharon pointed. At this moment, Wu Ming, with his A+ great agility, launched a surprise attack on the demon god pillar. At this moment, Wu Ming had already put on his armor and wore a helmet that completely covered his head. Wu Ming was like a silver dragon. As for the demon god pillar, it was as if the person it was waiting for had arrived. Regardless of whether it was the mechanical infantry or Nightingale, the demon god pillar no longer cared about them. Countless tentacles extended from the demon god pillar's muscles to attack. Wu Ming at the same time, the Wu Ming was the demon god pillar's and Wu Ming. Countless tentacles surrounded Wu Ming from all directions, which could be described as a killing move for ordinary servants. However, for Wu Ming, although it was dangerous, it was not fatal. Wu Ming did not stop and continued to run toward the demon god pillar, ignoring the Wu Ming's corrosive tentacles. Wum dash, the air vibrated, and a buzzing sound was heard. Then, the magic around Wu Ming's body condensed, and under Wu Ming's control, the condensed magic exploded in the surroundings. Boom! A dull sound was heard, and a ring of magic that could be seen with the naked eye spread out from Wu Ming in an instant. The encirclement formed by the Wu Ming's tentacles was instantly broken through by the magic that could be seen with the naked eye. Like petals, the tentacles were fragmented and turned into pure magic that dissipated. This was pure power that did not require any fancy tricks. What? Helena was shocked when she saw this scene. What's wrong? Edison asked cautiously. Madame Blavatsky was just sighing at his strength. Sharon smiled helplessly and explained to Edison. Just the simple release of magic was enough to destroy the metal of the tentacles that everyone worked together to destroy. From this, it could be seen how powerful Wu Ming was in terms of the amount and control of magic. Compressing a large amount of magic, condensing it around his body, and then releasing the compressed magic in the form of Wu Ming's magic was a test of his control. And the premise of this was that he had sufficient magic power. It could be said that the magic power just now was comparable to the magic power required by the light spear, or even exceeded it by a lot. To be able to use the magic power of such a noble artifact to release magic power, it was not something that a first-rate servant could do. It could be said that even a first-rate servant would not have such magic power. After all, if the amount of magic power was not enough, it would be impossible to do it. And to be able to use that kind of magic power twice without batting an eyelid, it could be seen that Wu Ming was not ordinary. The most important thing was that Wu Ming only used magic power to destroy the tentacles, which was enough to prove that Wu Ming was powerful. True power was not a fancy ability, but a kind of power that had reached the pinnacle. So that's how it is. Your Excellency, Holy Ruler, is indeed Your Excellency, Holy Ruler, to be so powerful. Edison's lion head showed an expression of sudden realization. However, such an expression was quite comical in the eyes of others. Since the Holy Ruler is here, it means that the Greek side has been resolved. Helena breathed a sigh of relief. Sharon seemed to agree with Helena's opinion and nodded. However, I feel a little uneasy about the demon god pillar here. Sharon looked at the demon god pillar. As a sage who had taught many heroes, Sharon had a feeling. That demon god pillar was not an ordinary one, but one with a strong will. It could be seen from the previous performance, so Sharon was very worried that the other side was up to something. However, even if there was a conspiracy, such a battle was not something they could investigate. In short, we should take this opportunity to save a few more injured residents. We can't let down Tachika's sincerity. The three nodded and slipped away from the battlefield. At the same time, they also took away Nightingale, who still wanted to charge at the demon god pillar. Edison brought the few remaining mechanical infantry and began to search for survivors. On Wu Ming's side, Wu Ming looked at the demon god pillar and vaguely felt a sense of familiarity. But even so, Wu Ming's actions did not stop. Wu Ming waved his hand, and the holy spear of light appeared out of nowhere and landed in Wu Ming's hand. Then, Wu Ming raised the spear of light to his shoulder and threw it at the demon god pillar like a javelin. The spear of light gradually thinned and turned into a needle of light. However, the demon god pillar only summoned a few more tentacles, blocking the needle of light. Wu Ming was not surprised. After all, Wu Ming had only injected a small amount of magic power, so it was not surprising that the demon god pillar could block it. At this moment, the demon god pillar suddenly spoke. Dragon of Origin, you're finally here. Chapter 540. Wu Ming's expression changed as he recognized the voice. Lev. Wu Ming said the name. As expected of the Dragon of Origin, you still remember me. But my current name is Flawless, Demon God Pillar Flawless. The Demon God Pillar laughed. But I don't think it's such a coincidence that the Demon God Pillar summoned this time is you. Wu Ming didn't believe that this wasn't Lev's doing. With 72 Demon God Pillars, Wu Ming didn't think his luck would be so good. The 72 Demon God Pillars are one. Unless you can destroy all the Demon God Pillars in an instant, I won't die. Demon God Pillar Flawless laughed eerily with Lev's voice. Wu Ming could imagine Lev's ugly face. However, this provided Wu Ming with information. I did think that you wouldn't die so easily, but I didn't expect us to meet so soon. Wu Ming didn't attack again, and Demon God Pillar Flawless didn't attack either. The two of them started to talk. This can't be helped. I'm the Demon God Pillar in charge of the information room. In other words, the other party might be able to see Wu Ming through some means or opportunity. As soon as you came to this singularity, I was already paying attention to you through the Holy Grail, Sarand. As if victory was already in his hands, Demon God Pillar Flawless said slowly. Wu Ming couldn't wait for someone to tell him the current situation, so he didn't disturb him and calmly listened to the Demon God Pillar. Oh, then what about that guy? Didn't he come personally? The chaos here is a gift he prepared for me. I don't want to steal the limelight. Wu Ming mocked the Magic King. Why would our king care about an immature dragon of origin? To tell you the truth, even if the Master of Chaldea conquered all 7 singularities with your help, it wouldn't affect our king at all. In other words, The other party had the confidence to win, or had the strength to not be disturbed. Wu Ming pondered. This is also the reason why our great king let you go in London's underground cavern. Demon god Pillar Flawless let out a terrifying laugh. Wu Ming frowned, but didn't refute him. Wu Ming clearly knew that he was indeed very weak. When facing a powerful enemy like the Magic King who was strengthened by the Black Origin soil, Wu Ming only had two things that could compare. The 12 incarnations who killed God, stole the god's authority, and combined with his own abilities and origin baptism. Also the Blade of Salvation, Divine Blade Savior's authority. The Blade of Salvation was also the Divine Blade Messiah's power. Although many of Wu Ming's abilities had been baptized by origin, there was no doubt that an ability or item with a high starting point would have a high achievement after being baptized by origin, just like the 12 incarnations and Blade of Salvation. Other than that, whether it was the Loon magic that Wu Ming had learned, the World Tree's magic from the alternate world, or the various powerful items that he had obtained, or even the relics that had been turned into Wu Ming's own, they were all rather useless. That was because when facing an enemy like the Magic King, these abilities and relics were useless. Moreover, Flawless also said that Wu Ming was an immature root dragon. Although in the eyes of many, Wu Ming was already very powerful, Wu Ming himself knew that he was actually very weak. After staying in the root dragon for a long time, Wu Ming gradually realized that a mature root dragon could be said to be the ruler of all the worlds, the protector of all the worlds. If he had to use a word to describe it, it would be the suppression of all the worlds. In other words, it was the heavenly axiom. It could be said that it was precisely because Wu Ming knew that he would eventually become such an existence that Wu Ming began to face the love that Maeve and the others had for him. After all, if Wu Ming kept delaying until then, perhaps Wu Ming's heart would really have turned into the merciless heavenly Tao. Take the planet's consciousness, Gaia, and the human consciousness, Aleia, as an example. As long as it did not threaten Earth and the human race as a whole, they would not care. Moreover, if it was only a threat to one side, the other side would basically not care. For example, in the crisis of the M-Moon world, the Magic King's means had threatened Aleia, so Aleia naturally had to do her best to save it. The Holy Grail's ability to summon servants on its own was the self-defense mechanism that Aleia had activated. However, because the Gaia and Aleia of this world had a slightly special relationship, the two of them could be considered to be in love, probably cough cough. In short, if Wu Ming had reached adulthood, then there was no doubt that he would be able to defeat the Magic King effortlessly. But now, the Magic King who had the Origin Black Mud was not afraid of Wu Ming, who was an immature Origin Dragon. After all, if Hope was killed in the cradle, then this so-called hope would be nothing. Then, what is the meaning of your current actions? Is it purely for the sake of waiting for me to pass the time? Wu Ming was naturally referring to the matter of pretending to be led by the nose by Sharon and the others. Not only that, Wu Ming, who had fully activated his mental power, saw Elizabeth and the others' futility, and also saw that Flawless was deliberately targeting Gadotsi and Matthew. Wu Ming sensed that one of the tentacles of the demon god pillar was absent-minded, and his intuition told him that Gadotsi and Matthew, who were searching for survivors, were in danger. Wu Ming trusted his intuition the most. As the Origin Dragon, all the world would subconsciously help Wu Ming, and this so-called intuition was also the help of similar worlds. Otherwise, why would Romo meet Gadotsi so coincidentally and repel the tentacle that wanted to kill the child Matthew was about to rescue? It was because Romo was asked by Wu Ming to meet Gadotsi and the others. Just treat it as my selfishness. My selfishness towards Matthew. Flawless, or rather Lev, was silent for a few seconds before answering Wu Ming. Oh, the demon god pillar has selfishness? That's really surprising. You don't have to deliberately mock me. No matter what, I have spent a lot of time in Chaldea. After saying that, Flawless stopped talking about this and turned to the root of this matter. Then, let's start the ravaging. Treat it as the price for the ravaging you did to me. As he said that, The countless eyes on the demon god pillar lit up with red light, and countless black and purple mist emitted from the demon god pillar. The ravaging began. Chapter 541. Needless to say, the demon god pillar Flawless this time was different from the one Wooming encountered in the Winterwood City. Not only was the shape and color more vigorous, but the attack power of the demon god pillar had also increased a lot. Because Flawless' target was Wooming, it did not disperse its attack. Instead, it deliberately gathered together to attack Wooming. Wooming naturally did not die in the first wave of attack, but he was slightly injured. Looking at the ground around the demon god pillar that was destroyed by the demon god mist and heat ray, Wooming's sense of danger towards Flawless increased by another level. The power of the heat ray emitted by the demon god pillar's eyes increased a lot. Anyway, it gave Wooming a sense of crisis. Although it was a little exaggerated, Wooming did rely on his skills and speed to avoid the heat ray. However, because it brushed past him several times, Wooming felt the intensity of the heat ray. Not only that, the dark purple demon mist was also a lot stronger. It could be said that if it were Elizabeth and the other servants, they would not be able to last more than 5 seconds in the demon mist. As for Sharon, who was restrained by poison, the demon mist with the poison attribute could even send Sharon back to the martyr's palace when it came in contact with him. Wooming had the noble armor, so his body was not hurt. However, the demon mist had the ability to ignore defense and corrode the spiritual base. A part of Wooming's spiritual base was directly corroded. As a result, Wooming repeatedly used his magic to release skills and rushed out of the area covered by the demon mist. The demon god pillar Flawless seemed to be deliberately playing with Wooming. After the first wave, it retracted the demon mist and did not attack again. How is it, Cylinder? This is the power that our king has bestowed upon us. The demon god pillar's eyes spun faster, and the demon mist was vaguely released again. It was not a precursor to an attack, but a sign of excitement and demonstration. After stretching his limbs, Wooming felt relieved when he sensed that Gadotsi, Sharon, and Elizabeth had retreated. His body was a servant's body that he created. Even if he died, it wouldn't matter. But Gadotsi wasn't like that. She was a complete human being. Seeing that Gadotsi and the others were covering the few rescued residents and retreating into the distance, Wooming once again used his mental power to search the ruins. Wooming heaved a sigh of relief after checking that there were no living beings. This way, he wouldn't have to worry about his surroundings. Your power comes from the Holy Grail, right? Since the Holy Grail was created by the Magic King, it's not hard to guess that it's able to help you demon god pillars. Wooming did not feel dispirited because the demon god pillar Flawless temporarily gained the upper hand. Instead, he began to make inferences. Oh, that's true. But so what? Flawless believed in the power given by its king. It was not afraid of Wooming's pretending to be calm in its eyes. This is power, the power that can defeat you in this era. The demon god pillar roared. Countless heat rays and demon mist attacked again. The momentum was much stronger than before. After I kill you, I'll kill everyone in this era. Who cares about being the last master of mankind? I'll let Chaldea and the others meet their doom in despair. At that moment, Flawless was a little excited. However, this had nothing to do with Wooming. He continued to dodge. Wooming retreated 1,000 meters away. Indeed, this body doesn't have the ability to deal with you for the time being. Even if it was the legend of the Holy King, mythical Yggdrasil, its greatest power without charging could only injure the demon god pillar that had obtained the power of the Magic King. If he wanted to kill it, he would need to charge up for a long time. Of course, Flawless would not give Wooming the chance. That was why Wooming did not have the ability to deal with Flawless for the time being. But unfortunately, I've just become good friends with Rama. Wooming smiled at Flawless. However, this smile made Flawless feel uneasy. Although Flawless was not afraid of Wooming, he did not think that Wooming was bluffing. What if he really had a way to deal with him? With this thought, Flawless increased the amount of magic output. In an instant, the countless eyes on the demon god pillar began to bleed. The amount of magic output exceeded the demon god pillar's tolerance and hurt itself instead. However, the result was a dark ball of light that was comparable to the power of dozens of holy swords appearing in front of the demon god pillar. Wu Ming could feel that if the dark ball of light exploded or formed into a light cannon, the power would definitely be able to blow up a huge hole in the American continent. It could even be said that it would not be difficult to create a new lake. It could be said that if Wu Ming did not activate his noble artifact, Arthur's gift, he would have been forced to leave the stage after being injured by this attack. As Flawless, who had been observing Wu Ming ever since he came to this singularity, he naturally knew that Wu Ming had such a noble phantasm. However, he knew that Wu Ming's noble phantasm was not like the legendary Avalon that could form an invincible domain. Wu Ming's noble phantasm was only an invincible shield. In that case, he only needed to go around the invincible shield. As Flawless, who had accepted the power of his king, he naturally had such a method. No matter if it was using the space fault or forcefully turning the light cannon, Flawless could do it. At that moment, Wu Ming moved according to Flawless' prediction. The armor on Wu Ming's body instantly disintegrated. Without a doubt, Wu Ming was ready to use this invincible shield. However, the next scene made Flawless think that Wu Ming was crazy. After the armor disintegrated, the various parts quickly flew around the demon god pillar, surrounding the demon god pillar and Wu Ming. Then, every armor part began to connect with each other. A seemingly transparent but incomparable light film appeared, wrapping Wu Ming and the demon god pillar Flawless, leaving only the sky. After all, the height of the demon god pillar could be said to be so high that one could not see the end. To be more specific, at that moment, an incomparable square barrier with no top covered each of them. It was the kind of invincible light barrier that would not affect the outside world because the aftermath would reach the sky. If the power was really strong, it could directly break through the atmosphere. There was only one word to describe it, and that was Trapped Beast Deathmatch. I see. Looks like you want to die together with me, Flawless said mockingly. In such a confined space, no matter if Flawless's dark light ball exploded or acted as a light cannon, the end result would be him being injured or even killed. Even with the top as a vent, no, it should be because of this vent that the aftermath of the damage would spread to the demon god pillar that reached the sky. Wu Ming smiled. Then I'm sorry. You think too much. Then, Wu Ming waved one hand, and a few weapons appeared behind Wu Ming. I just don't want my attack to hurt Tachika. Chapter 542. At that moment, Wu Ming looked like Gilgamesh, who was using the Gate of Babylon. However, the only difference was that the 5 armies were not lined up side by side behind Wu Ming. Dozens of glowing weapons floated around Wu Ming like stars surrounding the moon, wrapping around Wu Ming. There were many types of weapons, such as discs, javelins, long sticks, short sticks, trident spears, giant swords, whiplocks, giant hammers, bows and arrows, and so on. Wu Ming waved his hands, and the weapons around him seemed to be pulled as they rotated slowly. Flawless, on the other hand, began to guard against Wu Ming's meaningless attack. What do you mean? Demon God Pillar Flawless's voice sounded a little frightened. Although it was not afraid of Wu Ming's tricks, it had no choice as the sun's incarnation had scared it. After all, the sun was not a trick, but a killer move that could be fatal. In the big hole in Winterwood City, Wu Ming's son made Flawless suffer. In the end, Flawless's body could not take it anymore, so Lev came out to replace it. In the end, Lev was also tortured by Wu Ming's flame until he fainted. After all, Wu Ming's sun incarnation was an inextinguishable flame. Almost nothing could extinguish the sun incarnation that Wu Ming used. You're just bluffing. Don't try to scare me. Flawless roared. Its eyes bulged slightly, and the dark light ball in front of it doubled in size. Although that was what it said, to make Flawless so angry, it was obvious that it had been suppressed. Wu Ming could see through its trick of using anger to cover up its fear. To put it simply, Flawless was actually deceiving itself. Indeed, this body does not have the ability to deal with you. but don't forget about the Holy Grail. As he said that, Wuming took out the Holy Grail that he had obtained in Denver from his precious artifact space. Difficult. Flawless recalled the fear of being dominated by the sun. Through the connection between the demon god pillars and his own intelligence ability, Flawless naturally knew how demon god Shudong, who had fused with the demon god pillar, died. The sun. With the blessing of the sun god, given by Wuming through Tamamonome and the Holy Grail as a medium, Wuming successfully summoned the sun incarnation. As if expelling all darkness, the incomparably dazzling sunlight illuminated the earth, and the world fell into white. This was the last scene that Floro saw through demon god Shudong's perspective. Then, it was like a broken string, and nothing else could be seen. Floro was very sure that it was the sun that had once ravaged him. But fortunately, it seemed that this move could only be used once. The blessing of the sun god had been completely used up. Since then, I have been paying attention to you. You didn't receive the blessing of the sun god at all. Floro roared. The funny thing was that he could have released his sure-kill dark light ball directly. While Wuming was still talking to Floro, he could have killed Wuming. However, Floro was already terrified. Looking weak on the outside was not scary, but the pain in his heart was fatal. I'm not going to use that move. Just as you said, I don't have the blessing of the sun god as a medium anymore. Wuming smiled and shook his head. However, Wuming's smile was incomparably terrifying in Floro's eyes. With a roar, the dark light ball in front of the demon god pillar exploded instantly, forming a huge dark light beam that swept towards Wuming. However, facing Floro's light beam, Wuming was not nervous at all. Didn't you say that I was scaring you? Then, whether I'm scaring you or not, it's up to you to try it yourself, Floro. As he spoke, the weapons that were emitting golden light around Wuming instantly gathered together and integrated into the Holy Grail that Wuming was holding. Swooshed on. The huge light beam instantly covered Wuming, but the light beam did not stop. Instead, it exploded towards the back and instantly hit the defensive light wall formed by Wuming's noble artifact. There was a huge collision sound. At this moment, a light beam that was extremely small compared to the light beam shot out from the demon god pillar and soared into the sky. Then, the light beam slashed from top to bottom, quickly and fiercely, and Floro's light beam was split apart. After the light beam disappeared, Wuming's figure appeared. Not only was he unscathed, but the Holy Grail in his hand was also gone. Instead, there was a holy sword that was similar to the Sword of Victory, but more elegant and powerful. What? Floro was horrified. It could not accept and was not willing to accept this result. That's the power of our king. How could you dissolve it so easily? Floro could no longer calm down. That sword, where did it come from? As if all eyes were about to pop out, countless eyes looked at the holy sword in Wuming's hand. I don't need to say anything more to you, Floro. As he spoke, Wuming raised the holy sword in his hand and injected magical power into it. The holy sword erupted with holy thunder and unprecedented light. It was an ultimate power that seemed to be able to split a star. Even the invincible light film formed by the armor could not completely block such power, because it was not a damage. Just like that, the power that could split a star seeped outside. In an instant, the ground of the singularity let out a sorrowful cry, and the sky was shrouded by dark clouds. Gadotsi, who felt uneasy, did not want to leave no matter what. She insisted on waiting not far away. She was waiting for the disaster to end, or waiting for the disaster to come. Inside the invincible light film formed by the armor. Damn, the dragon of origin! Floro seemed to have known his ending. He was not willing to accept his end and launched an attack. Compared to the beginning, the number and quality of tentacles were one step higher. The heat ray that was comparable to the holy sword and the demon mist that was so dark that it made people tremble were all attacking Wuming. The price that Floro paid for releasing these super powerful attacks was that the entire body of the demon god pillar had shrunk by at least 3 times. At that moment, the demon god pillar was like a bamboo pole that was about to die. However, Wuming did not care about it at all. Before these attacks arrived, Wuming only slashed in the direction of Floros. In an instant, the power that could split a star turned into a light beam that was even bigger than the one released by the demon god pillar. Looking at this power that could definitely destroy Gaia, Floros finally understood why Wuming used the invincible defense to trap them one by one. It was not that he wanted to use the power of the demon god pillar to perish together, but Wuming was afraid of hurting this land, this singularity. Floros had no doubt that Wuming's move could directly break this singularity. Then, Floros did not know what happened, because the power of the holy sword that could split a star had already covered it. In the outside world, Gadatsi's face was gloomy. Behind her stood a group of followers. Everyone looked nervously at the transparent barrier not far away that was covered in white. Ka Rong raised his head and looked at the light beam that had already rushed out of the sky. He felt the magic power that could break the barrier and let out a sigh of relief. It seems that he is hiding an unimaginable identity. Chapter 543. The reason why Sharon was relieved was because the beam of light was gradually weakening. Because if the intensity just now continued, Sharon believed that this singularity would probably explode. If there was space, the energy would rush out of the atmosphere and enter space. But unfortunately, there was no space here. After all, this was a singularity that was out of human nature. In other words, this was actually an independent subspace. In subspace, there was no universe. In fact, it was because Wuming finally thought of this that he gradually weakened the beam of light. Not to mention the servants, Gadatsi and Matthew were doomed. Did they really think that the power of time and space was illusory? As mentioned before, if Wuming didn't have the Dragon of Origin's racial talent of time and space, he wouldn't dare to travel through time and space at will. Gem Wuming also relied on the records of his existence in each world, and combined with the second law to be able to travel through parallel worlds. Unlike Rick's world and the world of the God Slayer, there were no records of Gem Wuming's existence. This was also one of the reasons why Gem Wuming couldn't come to other worlds and could only travel through parallel worlds. Back to the main topic. After Wuming destroyed the demon god pillar, the invincible light wall around him automatically disintegrated and turned back into armor on Wuming's body. The sky and the earth also returned to their original state, and the mournful cry disappeared. And the place that was originally covered by the invincible light film was now 3 feet underground. It couldn't be helped. Wuming's beam of light didn't only extend upward, but also underground. It could be said that if Wuming didn't deliberately leave the sky and didn't create a sealed space, the earth would have been penetrated by now. Of course, the result of this singularity was the destruction of the singularity. He didn't care about the hole in the earth that he created. After all, the singularity would automatically repair the place that was different from the original work. Regarding the singularity's automatic repair of everything that happened in the singularity, Wuming actually knew about that drawback. Those who were killed by servants would not be resurrected after the singularity was restored. Instead, after the singularity was restored, the world would modify them to be killed by bandits. After all, a person's life and death wasn't something that a mere world could casually interfere with. Or rather, in the eyes of the world, those who were killed were already dead. The only thing that was fixed was the process of being killed. The result wouldn't change. Wuming guessed that Gadatsi and the others still didn't know about this. Wuming didn't think that Roman would be so heartless to tell them this fact. It was a sad story. Immediately after, Wuming discovered Gadatsi and the others not far away. Wuming flew towards Gadatsi and the others. Assassin. Gadatsi rushed into Wuming's arms and hugged Wuming's neck with tears in her eyes. Wuming was so scared that he could only let go of the holy sword in his hand and let it float beside Wuming, while Wuming's hands hugged Gadatsi. Wuming gently patted the little girl's back. He was a little confused for a moment. What's going on? At this time, Karen stood up. Master, she has been worried about you. and she doesn't want to leave. Karen laughed helplessly. In fact, when Gadatsi wanted to stay in the beginning, Sharon was opposed to it. After all, even if all their servants died here, they couldn't let Gadatsi get hurt. Just as Karen was about to take Gadatsi away, Matthew took the lead and stood up. I believe in senpai, and I also believe in senpai. Karen was stunned by that pair of noble and flawless eyes. Then, more servants voted, and the result was that they basically stood on Gadatsi's side. I don't think my friend will lose. I've even lent him all my weapons. It was not easy for me to defeat Hector again. I did not come here to escape. The Apache gods will protect him. I was ordered by that man to protect Tachika. Even if I am a hunter, I will not go back on my words. My husband will be fine. Migu, it was him who woke me up from being influenced by the president's power. I will support him. These were the thoughts of the servants who directly chose to stay. But the servants who indirectly chose to stay were more strange. Shala will stay. I will stay too. Anjin-sama will stay. I will stay too. Edison-sama is also enlightened. In that case, I will stay too. Demon God Pillar is a virus. It needs to be eliminated. Ah, so troublesome. I have to stay too. Well, I will accompany the ladies. Of course, there were a lot of strange reasons, but it could be said that except for Karen, all the servants directly or indirectly chose to stay with Gadatsi. But what could Karen do? He could not beat up these servants who protected Gadatsi and take away Gadatsi. So he could only stay together. Although he did not believe in wombing, but as the wise one in the team, he always had to consider the safety of the general. In that case, let's wait here together. In the end, Karen also cast his almost useless vote. Thinking of the vote just now, Karen felt powerless. In short, Senpai is very worried about Senpai. Matthew looked at Gadatsi in Wooming's arms. At this moment, she felt that her Senpai was an ordinary little girl. Wooming could only smile helplessly. Then Wooming patted Gadatsi's little head. Have you forgotten that I'm not dead? Even if this spirit base is gone, my body is still intact. However, Gadatsi raised her head from Wooming's arms and looked at Wooming with tears in her eyes. But I'm just worried about you. This scene made Kyoheim and Tamuname show signs of anger, but they were held down by Elizabeth, Helena, and others. You little girl, Wooming didn't know what to say and could only pinch Gadatsi's little nose. Hee, just like the weather in June. Gadatsi's tearful face instantly turned into a smiling face. Holding Gadatsi like this, Wooming began to ask about business. By the way, how far did you push Rome's forces? How did they summon the demon god Pillar directly? Let me answer this question. At this time, a weak voice came. It was no doubt Roman. Roman? Has Chaldea replied already? That's fast. Wooming complained. How can not be fast? Da Vinci is exhausted. At this time, Olga Marie's figure was suddenly projected on the side. Chapter 544. Hey, isn't this Olga? Long time no see. Wooming warmly greeted Olga Marie. Wooming also vaguely saw the poor Roman who was knocked to the ground. Hey, director, you finally came out. Gadatsi was surprised by Olga Marie's appearance. How long have you been in your room? You don't even have a sense of presence. Wooming complained in his heart. While Wooming and Gadatsi were warmly greeting each other, Olga Marie was blushing at the moment. Of course, the blushing was not caused by the greeting between the two. You two guys, how long do you want to hug me? At this time, Wooming realized that he was still hugging Gadatsi. If you didn't say it, I would have forgotten. And Gadatsi also just realized this problem, unhurriedly got down from Wooming's arms. Although the two seemed to be very close, in fact, the relationship between Wooming and Gadatsi was not like what Olga Marie thought. Gadatsi has always regarded Wooming as a reliable person like a brother, not a lover's attachment, and Wooming only regarded Gadatsi as a sister, the kind that was quite doting. In fact, neither Wooming nor Gadatsi realized that since they met, the affection between the two sides was getting deeper and deeper, and this affection was not love or friendship, but kinship and so on. What's wrong with a brother and sister hugging? However, this was not the case for Olga Marie, who didn't know very much. In her eyes, it was just a matter of her subordinate hooking up with her personal servant. Humph! You are my servant. Don't casually contact other masters, Olga Marie said angrily. However, it seemed that the only other master was Gudatsi. Yes, my master Olga Marie, then. Can you tell me what happened? Olga Marie's face was red, and then she began to tell her story. After all, it was not a long story. Olga Marie only spent about 2 minutes to finish it. After Gudatsi and the others met up with Edison, they came here and launched an attack on the Roman side. Of course, after all, it was to cover the action of Wuming and others. The servants only made a little move, basically relying on Edison's mechanical infantry to fight with Rome soldiers. However, they didn't see any Roman servants, and the mechanical infantry, with the help of the servants, naturally defeated the Rome soldiers. In the end, they found that there were almost no Roman soldiers coming out of the city. Everyone stopped and began to discuss. Some people proposed to directly enter the city to retrieve the Holy Grail, but more people thought Wuming's plan, including Gudatsi. After all, Gudatsi knew that she could use the Holy Grail to summon the demon god Pillar, so she was more worried that Rome would directly summon the demon god Pillar if he was forced into a corner. After this news was told to everyone, those who proposed to directly attack the city were silent. By the way, Olga Marie also supported the attack. When she talked about this matter, her face was red. After all, the demon's pillar was not a joke. If it appeared now, the servants would not be able to stop it. Olga Marie was not here, but Gudatsi was in danger. Just when everyone was ready to retreat, the demon's pillar suddenly appeared in the city and began to destroy the people and things around it. And for some reason, the demon's pillar was like a joke, passively led by everyone. But this was also good. In this way, Gudatsi and others could go and search for survivors. However, from the tentacles that attacked Gudatsi and others, it could be seen that the demon's pillar was indeed playing. It was waiting. And after Wuming's arrival, the demon's pillar no longer paid attention to other people's reactions. That person was most likely Wuming. Fortunately, the demon's pillar and Wuming's conversation was communicated through a special magic transmission. After all, if the demon's pillar really spoke by itself, with its size, the sound was enough to be heard by all the servants here. Although Floros was a demon's pillar, it was not a guy who was willing to let others listen to it. Otherwise, it would have already spoken. Why wait until Wuming's arrival to talk to Wuming? And Wuming, who thought of Floros, looked at Matthew. Matthew. Wuming looked at Matthew with some hesitation. Senior, do you have anything else? Matthew looked at Wuming. Although it was Wuming who spoke first, Wuming was silent. Shaking his head, Wuming decided to speak. Floros, Orlev is a little obsessed with you. Wuming's words not only made Matthew stunned, but even the surrounding servants and Gudatsi were puzzled. Wuming used his mental power to see Floros' behavior that could be said to be targeting Matthew, coupled with the other party's anger toward Chaldea and Matthew's identity as a test tube baby. Wuming could almost guess something. Although no one mentioned Matthew's identity as a test tube baby, Wuming's eyesight could still see that Matthew was a little different. Nothing, I'm just guessing, don't mind it. Wuming immediately laughed and shook his head. This caused everyone to be confused. But Matthew was thinking about something. It seemed that she had some feelings in her heart. In order to avoid an awkward silence, Achilles spoke. To be able to get rid of that special demon god Pillar, you really are the one who forced me to a dead end, Sodric. Achilles laughed like a bandit and put his arm around Wuming's shoulder. Just now, when Wuming and the demon god Pillar Floros were fighting, Achilles, who defeated Hector, drove his chariot over. However, looking at the injury on his heel, history had probably repeated itself, and Hector had broken his immortality. However, Hector once again repeated history and left the arena after a one-on-one fight with Achilles. Oh no! After being reminded by Achilles, Wuming suddenly thought of something. What's wrong? Gudatsi looked at Wuming. At this time, Roman's weak voice came. That, Your holy grail hasn't been recovered yet." Everyone was silent. It seemed to be true, because everyone ignored this matter because of the interaction between Wuming and Gadatsi, and Wuming just happened to see Gadatsi when he was putting away the armor and flew down before he had time to recover it. "Ahem, I'll go retrieve it now." Wuming smiled awkwardly and prepared to fly over. But unfortunately, the place where the demon god pillar was previously located, which was the current huge pit, suddenly erupted with a pillar of magic energy that soared to the sky. Ugh! Wuming covered his head with a headache. This was great, this was bad. Chapter 545. Wuming told Sharon and others to take Gadatsi to the distance. Some of the servants knew that they were not strong, so they spontaneously acted as Gadatsi's guards. There were some who were forced to stay by Gadatsi's side, such as Nightingale. As for the willful Xiao Yu, who wanted to go with Wu Ming, she was dismissed by Wu Ming's words. A virtuous wife must first be obedient. The remaining servants followed Wu Ming to the giant pit to see the situation. Achilles was driving the chariot, and Wu Ming, Rama, and Sharon were standing on the chariot. Only Atlanta was not weak, but she did not follow them. Wu Ming said half-jokingly, "We men are enough. Tachika will be taken care of by you women." These words made Robin Hood and Billy Boy blush with shame. But Geronimo did not care about these things. So, Wu Ming, Sharon, and Rama, along with Achilles, sat on his chariot and flew to the center of the giant pit to see the situation. The giant magic pillar that was visible to the naked eye just now was completely gone at this moment. Because of this, they dared to come to the center to see the situation. The reason was quite simple. Being able to withstand fire damage did not mean that they had to bear it when the fire was burning. They could wait for the fire to extinguish before taking action. Wu Ming and others also saw that the magic pillar disappeared and rushed over. However, the disappearance of the magic pillar did not mean that the magic in the giant pit disappeared. Wu Ming and the others could clearly feel the huge source of mana below them. They were certain that the owner of that mana was below them. But because there was still residual magic and dust, and the magic source at the bottom of the giant pit was constantly emitting magic, coupled with the darkness in the pit, everyone could hardly see the bottom. Sharon began to use clairvoyance to carefully look below, but the magic in the giant pit blocked Karen's clairvoyance, so he could not see clearly. This is bad. The other party is at least as strong as Achilles, or even stronger. We can't go down rashly. Although Karen's words made Achilles very unhappy, they were the truth. Achilles could only smack his lips. Rama also frowned. That magic power makes me feel uneasy. It's a feeling of being restrained. Wu Ming's face, on the other hand, did not change in the slightest. Looking at the dark crater below, Wu Ming sensed a familiar power. The master of that power was the servant that Wu Ming had seen before, the destroyer of civilization, Attila, the Hun king. In fact, if he thought about it carefully, it made sense. The other party's noble phantasm was the divine sword of the Roman god of war. It was not strange for him to be related to the Roman forces. Seems like it's an old rival. Achilles, Sharon, Rama, wait for me here. I'll go down myself. The three of them looked at Wu Ming with surprise, but considering Wu Ming's current state, they calmed down. The armor that originally separated from his body was once again attached to his body, leaving only his head exposed. Wu Ming's magic power constantly circulated on the armor, making it look even more holy. Similarly, Wu Ming's holy sword, Divine Blade of Salvation, was once again held in Wu Ming's hand. Pure magic power was also circulating on the sword. Just one strike was enough to make the demon god pillar retreat. The lightning and radiance of this holy sword left an incomparably deep impression on Sharon and the others. It could be said that if Wu Ming said that he could defeat the servant in the giant pit, Sharon and the others would not think that Wu Ming was lying. It cannot be helped. The Divine Blade of Salvation was just that powerful. I really did not expect my friend to have such a deep connection with me. My noble phantasm actually drew out your noble phantasm. Rama's face revealed a strange expression. The various types of weapons that were floating around Wuming were actually Rama's rarely used noble phantasm, Vishun Buja. It was a class of noble phantasm that had once received the legendary materialization of the holy god's weapon. It then formed the appearance of Gilgamesh's Gate of Babylon. Of course, unlike Gilgamesh's Gate of Babylon, Rama's weapon did not exceed 50 pieces. It was not realistic to want to use it as a cannon. Moreover, just penetrating Brahmastra was enough for Rama, which was why Rama rarely used this noble phantasm. When he walked out of Demetrius's portal, Wuming borrowed this rarely used noble phantasm from Rama. This was because Wuming needed an insurance that could defeat everything. Since the sun god's blessing and the Holy Grail could draw out one of Wuming's noble phantasm, the sun incarnation, it was not impossible to use the Vishun Buja and the Holy Grail to draw out the divine blade of salvation. After all, the divine blade of salvation was the Manchala formation that the gods created for Rama, the last king. Although Rama in this world was not given almost all weapons by the gods, he had a weapon that was given by the holy god. It could be said that Rama's Vishun Buja was the divine blade of salvation of the God-Slayer world on the other side of the Shape Moon world. Although the difference in power between the two was not small, it was not a problem to use the Vishun Buja as a holy relic to summon the divine blade of salvation that Wuming inherited from the last king. Rama, if it's you, you should be able to feel the power inside, right? As he spoke, Wuming placed the divine blade of salvation in front of his chest. Rama nodded. Because of the connection, Rama could clearly see the Manchala formation in the divine blade of salvation, as well as the endless number of weapons. It was also because of this that Rama took the opportunity to understand some of Wuming's information that outsiders did not know. Although he could not understand most of the information like Stheno and Tamamonome, Rama still understood a lot. Currently, Rama only knew that Wuming defeated the last king Rama in the alternate world and inherited the last king's position to obtain the divine blade of salvation. Although Rama's expression was a little strange after knowing that he was in the alternate world and not a parallel world, after all, his alternate world self was indeed a little strange. If that's the case, then I won't say anything more. Sharon gave up on nagging. He could only say that he was used to nagging as a teacher. TSK? Although I'm not happy, if we follow him down, we might become a burden. Achilles was being frank for once. Don't worry, I'll take care of the enemy. With a confident smile, Wuming closed his helmet. His dragon horns emitted a holy cold light under the sun. With a light leap, Wuming flipped over and turned into a silver ray of light, falling into the bottomless pit. Chapter 546. In the giant pit, Wuming felt as if he had fallen into an abyss. Darkness without light shrouded him. That's strange. Wuming used his mental power to examine the unfathomable bottom and frowned in thought. With Wuming's flying speed, he should have reached the core of the earth by now. Besides, Wuming speculated that the giant pit was not that deep. This was almost a small world of its own. Could it be an inherent enchantment? Wuming thought as his magical power surged onto the blade of the divine blade of salvation. The divine blade of salvation was still capable of breaking through with brute force. Just then, a ray of light lit up from the bottom of the abyss. The dazzling light instantly covered Wuming. Wuming subconsciously closed his eyes. Then, Wuming felt his feet touching the ground. Wuming opened his eyes and found that everything in front of him had changed. Grassland? After a moment of surprise, Wuming quickly calmed down. Wuming was now standing on a vast grassland. Feeling the breeze brushing his cheeks, the fragrance of the grass at his feet, and the narrow magical power space, Wuming was almost certain that this was an inherent enchantment. After removing the restrictions of the helmet, Wuming's short hair swayed with the breeze. Wuming took 2 steps forward, came to a small mound, and began to investigate. Unfortunately, even so, there was still an endless grassland around and in the distance. Just then, the The sound of horse hooves suddenly came from afar. Wuming looked at the black dot in the distance that gradually grew bigger, and his eyes condensed magical power. He saw that the black that was gradually approaching was a dark-skinned girl riding a horse. It was the Hun King that Wuming fought, the war god girl Attila. Although the girl was expressionless, Wuming could see a trace of joy in the girl's eyes. She was enjoying the joy of galloping on the prairie, just like a true child of the prairie. Very soon, Attila approached Wuming on her fine horse. Then, as if she couldn't see Wuming, she galloped past Wuming. Wuming looked suspiciously at Attila, who had already left behind him. Then, he squatted down and grabbed a handful of green grass. So that's how it is. Wuming stood up and turned to look at the girl who was leaving. He suddenly understood. This place was not purely an inherent barrier. As everyone knew, the inherent enchantment was the manifestation of one's mind, and it was used to influence the world. At this moment, even though the grassland here was also considered a physical object, to be more specific, it was an incomparably clear illusion. Wuming looked at the grass in his hand. The grass had already disappeared like smoke. A scene between a soul image and an inherent barrier. Then, it shouldn't be an inherent barrier that Attila released on her own initiative, right? Looking at Attila, who was gradually turning into a black, Wuming pondered. This is probably Attila's memories from when she was a Hun. Wuming guessed correctly. Just like how servants and masters would dream of each other's experiences, this was Attila's dream. Originally, because Attila was too dangerous, Romulus used the Holy Grail to seal Attila. Because she was sealed by the Holy Grail, Attila had always been in a state of unconsciousness and dreaming. Because the demon god pillar was destroyed and the Holy Grail was not taken away, Attila relied on the Holy Grail to continue dreaming. After all, Attila was also affected, which was why she was in a state of half-awake. The previous demon god pillar had erupted because of this. Of course, Wuming naturally didn't know about this. Wuming guessed that Attila was used as a sacrifice to summon the demon god pillar. Then, after the demon god pillar was destroyed, Attila had this incomplete dream because of the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail made this dream incomplete, and Wuming happened to intrude, seeing the scene of the girl galloping on the grassland. No matter what the reason was, Attila didn't come out of the huge pit because of the dream, but instead stayed in the huge pit. But at this time, the surrounding environment suddenly began to change. As if it was distorted, except for Wuming himself, the space was in chaos. Wuming didn't feel any danger, so he didn't move, calmly waiting. Immediately, the space began to recover, but looking at the color, it shouldn't be a grassland anymore. This time, Wuming's surroundings turned into a narrow stone room. This narrowness was naturally not from his perspective, but from the girl who occupied most of the space in this stone room. The huge white-haired girl was lying on a stone bed in the middle of the stone room, with a smile on her face as she fell into a deep sleep. Although the stone room was narrow, it was just enough for this giant girl to sleep, so it didn't seem too crowded. Thus, Wuming had enough space to stand. The smiling giant girl sleeping was Attila. Wuming, on the other hand, didn't have any thoughts of Attila. That three-nothingness actually knows how to smile. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that this enormous Attila wasn't the girl who had galloped on the grassland just now. The two were definitely related, just like how Wuming used his dependents to create a clone. But a clone was a clone and couldn't become Wuming's main body. Wuming felt that the giant girl in front of him and Attila, the Hun, had a relationship similar to that of a main body and a clone. At this time, the eyelids of the giant girl lying on the stone bed moved. In the next second, the girl opened her eyes. The giant girl sat up slowly, showing a sitting posture of a young girl. Wuming and the giant girl didn't speak. Both of them stared at each other calmly. However, Wuming saw joy in the giant girl's eyes. Wuming could see that it was the joy of someone finally came or no longer alone. In this way, Wuming would be able to know a little. Even if the giant girl had been sleeping in this stone room for a long time, "If you don't say anything, I'm going to leave," Wuming suddenly said. Wait a minute." The giant girl's gentle voice came. as if she was afraid of scaring Wuming. But even so, Wuming could hear the anxiety and worry in the girl's voice. Wuming smiled. "Don't worry, I'm just kidding." After hearing Wuming's words, the giant girl breathed a sigh of relief. Then, as if she had been enlightened, the giant girl realized that she had been fooled. She looked at Wuming with her small face, if she had a normal body shape. However, Wuming still didn't see anger, resentment, or any other negative emotions in her eyes. Her eyes were still filled with joy and surprise. Sorry, I apologize. It's my fault." Wuming smiled and apologized to the giant girl. "It's nothing. Actually, as the master, I should have spoken first." As if she thought of something, the giant girl lowered her head and stopped looking at Wuming. There was a trace of fear in her eyes. It was nothing else but the fear that others might be afraid of her. Wuming's eyes flashed with a glimmer of light. Then he smiled. "Who do you think I am? Something that can make me afraid hasn't been born yet." Then, under the giant girl's surprised gaze, Wuming walked to the giant girl's lap and sat down cross-legged. Chapter 547. The giant girl was quite surprised by Wuming's bold behavior, but she didn't chase away Wuming, who was sitting on her lap. Instead, she lowered her head and talked to Wuming. Wuming told Attila his name, and Attila also told her name. However, Wuming was quite familiar with this girl. At least, he knew her name long ago, because Wuming had seen this giant girl in the origin of the M-shaped moon world. The Star Scout, the destroyer of civilization, the giant god Attila. This explained why Wuming said to Attila to dream peacefully back in Winterwood City. But Wuming always felt that the name Attila wasn't her real name. After all, this name was the same as the Hun King. Or was the Hun King's name based on Attila's name? Both are possible, but it didn't matter. A name was just a code name. Wuming had many names, such as Villo, Sodlek, Hyunryong, and Selander. Although there was a name that wasn't really a name. Ahem. If it weren't for the fact that Wuming was his original name, Wuming wouldn't have chosen this name as his real name. After all, to the root of origins dragons, names and whatnot meant nothing. Just like that, Wuming and Attila chatted like a pair of close friends. They got a lot of information from Wuming, or rather, it was Attila who took the initiative to tell Wuming. After all, although Wuming had once soaked in the origin of the M-shaped moon world, Wuming didn't use the origin to investigate the information of the M-shaped moon world. Naturally, he wasn't very clear about Attila's situation. This stone room was actually the control room of a spaceship in the core of the moon. Attila's stone bed was the control panel, and Attila herself was the control lever. However, she couldn't activate the spaceship because she was trapped in this place. Although Attila didn't care much about her personal freedom, she still couldn't activate the spaceship. As for why Wuming was here, it was because of Attila. Attila was actually an avatar of Attila on Earth. Under normal circumstances, if Attila fell asleep, he would be dreaming of Attila or dreaming of other dreams. By the way, do you remember the last time we met in Winterwood City? Wuming asked curiously. Of course I remember. After all, that was the first time someone cared about me. Attila said with a happy smile on his face. Attila's reply stunned Wuming. Just a simple conversation triggered by knowing a little about Attila's situation made Attila so happy that someone cared about her. How lonely would she have to be to say something like that? That was 14,000 years of loneliness. How did Attila, who had gained sentient personality, endure it? It was just a dream. Apart from the few times when he dreamt of Attila, the heroic spirit, he dreamt more of what Wuming saw just now. Galloping freely on the endless grassland, without restraint, without harm. Feeling a slightly sad atmosphere in the stone room, Attila quickly changed the topic and began to talk about Attila's singularity in the United States. Because the Magic King sent a new Holy Grail, along with Romulus Link's summoning, many servants who were more or less related to Rome were summoned, including Attila, the Hun who held the war god sword of Mars. And because of Attila's reluctance to destroy and Romulus's fear, before she was fully summoned, she was detected by Romulus and sealed with the Holy Grail. Of course, if Attila resisted, she could have broken free at the beginning of the seal, but Attila, or Attila's heart, didn't want to destroy it. Attila's identity was an alien cosmic destruction weapon that destroyed planets. She was originally emotionless, but because Attila would absorb the technology, knowledge, and civilization of the destroyed planets, the result was that she became quite gentle, tolerant, and pure. Obviously, the civilization of the last planet that Attila destroyed must be an intellectual system full of motherhood and love. In the beginning of the conversation with Attila, Wuming felt that Attila was a lively girl full of excitement. But after chatting for a long time, Wuming felt that Attila was a gentle woman full of motherhood and the calmness and tolerance of an elder. It felt like she had multiple personalities. In fact, Wuming's guess was not wrong. According to Attila herself, she had 3 personalities, but these 3 personalities were not mixed. Instead, they were clearly independent of each other. At the beginning, there was the side of a young girl, the side of an intellectual, motherly, and tolerant goddess, and the side of a follower or heroic spirit, Attila, a cold and fearsome warrior side. This was why Wuming could immediately feel that Attila had multiple personalities. Attila's personalities were clearly separated and were relatively easy to distinguish. It could be said that Attila the giant had the calmness and tolerance of an elder, the illusory and loneliness of a lonely position, and the calmness and coldness of an invader. However, these personalities would change according to the people or things that she faced. Just like Attila, who was frightened at the beginning, that was the delicate and cute side of a young girl. After interacting with Wuming for a while, Attila showed the motherly, intellectual, gentle, and tolerant side of a goddess. As for the warrior side of Attila, it would basically no longer appear in her original body. It would only appear in Attila as a heroic spirit. Afterwards, Wuming asked how he came here. "Actually, I pulled your spiritual body here," Attila said with some embarrassment. Her current shy appearance should be that of a young girl. According to Attila, when Attila was sealed by the Holy Grail and brought into the demon god Pillar's body, the seal was still stable. Attila used Attila's identity to dream of galloping on the grasslands. Afterwards, when Wuming got rid of the demon god Pillar, the powerful force destroyed part of the Holy Grail seal on Attila. As a result, it created a strange area under the huge crater that was neither an environment nor an inherent barrier. It was in between the two, and Wuming just happened to enter Attila's dream. Attila was indeed unable to discover Wuming's existence, but Attila did. Therefore, Attila directly used the Holy Grail and that special area to pull Wuming's spiritual body to the spaceship in the center of the moon. According to Attila, it was like this: "Because, Wuming, you have been releasing your spiritual power roughly. I thought you were asking me to pull you here." Attila had a careful expression on her face. She was afraid of making Wuming unhappy. Wuming smiled helplessly. It turned out that his spiritual power that was only used for investigation had become a burden. He had to train it properly in the future. And at this time, Wuming thought of something. "My use of spiritual power is rough. Does Attila have any methods to help train spiritual power?" Immediately, Attila nodded. Wuming smiled. This was like a pillow when he was sleepy. Chapter 548. According to Attila, the previous civilization she destroyed was actually a civilization that developed spiritual power. This was in line with the development of the intellectual system that was full of motherhood and love. After all, people with gentle hearts often had strong spiritual power. He had never seen Attila use such power before, but that was only because spiritual power was useless to her, which was why she almost didn't use it. After all, the giant god was an existence that used brute force to break through technique, so why would he bother with those empty things? Following that, with Attila's rough guidance, Wuming easily learned the use of spiritual power and other branches of it. For example, telekinesis now. "Wah!" Attila shouted in a panic because she had left the stone bed and was floating in the stone room. Even so, the stone room didn't seem crowded, as if it could adjust the internal space according to Attila. I see. The use of spiritual power is so simple, Wu-Ming said with a smile as he looked at Attila, who was floating in the air under his telekinesis playfully. Then, Attila felt as if a pair of hands were touching her skin. She knew that it was Wu-Ming's telekinesis. Although she didn't hate it, she didn't like it when invisible things were messing around on her skin. Because, Wu-Ming, your spiritual power is already very strong. And if you don't keep training your spiritual power, even if it's a very crude method to persist, it's still strengthen a lot. It's just that Wu-Ming doesn't know how to use it. Even without me, you could have developed to this extent on your own. Attila blushed and stuttered. Attila was right. Wu-Ming would take some time to meditate every day, but Wu-Ming's initial meditation was just to maintain his sense of self. The root dragon had no lifespan limit. In this way, Wu-Ming used meditation to stabilize his youthful heart so that his mentality wouldn't age with age. This was also why Wu-Ming, who was almost 100 years old, still had the mindset of a young man and did not have the attitude of an old man at all. Of course, this was the age for ordinary people. After all, 100 years old was a complete underage age for the origin dragon, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call a baby. However, Wu-Ming's meditation also produced side products, which were the development of mental strength and the purification of mana. Mental power was something that could not be touched. The mental power of the origin dragon. No, it should be said that it had no shortcomings in any aspect. Therefore, Wu-Ming was able to develop mental power during meditation, and it was a very strong mental power developed through rough methods. It couldn't be helped. After all, consolidating a young heart was the main theme of Wu-Ming. It was already very good that the spiritual power of a byproduct could reach such a level. No, it should be said that for the origin dragon, such an outcome was normal. The second point was mana purification. As the root dragon, Wu-Ming had almost unlimited mana. However, almost unlimited and infinite were two different things. In other words, Wu-Ming's mana would also be used up. In this way, there were two solutions. One was to find a way to obtain unlimited mana, and the other was to purify the mana. Wu-Ming didn't consider the first point and chose the second one instead, because in Wu-Ming's opinion, purification of mana was especially important. For example, a relic that required 100 points of mana to release could be released with only 10 points of mana after purification. This effect of getting twice the result with half the effort was what Wu-Ming liked to pursue. Wu-Ming didn't think that there was truly unlimited mana. The so-called unlimited mana was just the fact that the recovery speed of mana was faster than the consumption, which created the illusion of unlimited mana. However, that was only Wu-Ming's guess. Since Wu-Ming had doubts about it, he wouldn't choose that path. Instead, he chose to purify mana. Wu-Ming's current mana had never been used up. At most, he only used half of it, and that was when he dealt with the last king, Rama. Even then, Wu-Ming still won. After defeating the last king, he also gained a lot of benefits, which made Wu-Ming even stronger. Therefore, in Wu-Ming's opinion, the mana he had was enough. What he needed to do was to improve the quality of the mana. Just like what was mentioned above, a relic that required 100 points of mana to release could be released with only 10 points of mana after purification. What a surprising result. With continuous purification in the future, it might even change from 10 points of mana to 1 point, or even 0 points of mana. Therefore, Wu-Ming valued quality and not quantity. In summary, Wu-Ming felt that Attila's words were right. However, Wu-Ming didn't agree with some of Attila's words. Wu-Ming knew himself well. At most, Wu-Ming would only use his mental strength to search for enemies. Moreover, he would only use it in such a simple and crude way. This was because Wu-Ming didn't want to develop in that direction. Not to mention that Wu-Ming had mastered the Lune magic, which was rare even in the Type Moon world. He had also mastered all the magic of the Yggdrasil world tree. Although Wu-Ming didn't master many magic spells. After all, he had the nameless spell book, which was why Wu-Ming was lazy. However, the fact that he could use it wouldn't change. Putting aside the martial arts that he had learned from Skaha, apart from magic and magic, Wu Ming's killer move was the god's authority that he had obtained by killing a god. Wu Ming only had a total of 3 authorities: the 12 clones, the Savior Divine Sword, and Ling Zhuzi. Due to Wu Ming's influence, the 12 clones had combined the powers of 2 gods. In addition to the origin baptism, they were the authorities of 12 worlds. They were extremely powerful. The Savior Divine Sword was the divine weapon that Wu Ming had obtained after defeating the last king, Rama, who had killed the God Slayers. Apart from that, the Savior Divine Sword contained a reward that the gods had given to the last king for killing the Demon King. It was the Manchala formation that contained almost all of the gods' god relics. The Savior Divine Sword was comparable to an EX-level relic and separated into the Manchala formation that contained almost all of the gods' god relics. One could say that it was an alternative gate of Babylon. Moreover, the Savior Divine Sword had been baptized by the origin baptism. It was no longer an ordinary item and had evolved to a higher level. As for Ling Zhuzi, Wu Ming had not used it for a long time. After all, Neza's ability was not considered powerful. He was only used as a demonic servant. Therefore, Wu Ming released Neza when he left the world of the God Slayers. Wu Ming had reminded Neza not to cause any trouble again and again. However, Wu Ming thought it was unbearable. However, he would not care as long as nothing serious happened. Wu Ming was the Lord Demon King who had saved that world. He had even defeated the last king. Wu Ming believed that nobody would disrespect him. All in all, Wu Ming's origin dragon was powerful. Although he had used a weakened servant body many times, Wu Ming did not pay too much attention to his spirit, because even if it was the body of a servant, it was still powerful enough. However, now that he had the guidance of a master, Wu Ming would definitely obtain new skills with half the effort. As a result, as Attila said, Wu Ming learned very quickly. He stopped teasing Attila and gently put Attila down with his telekinesis. Wu Ming used his telekinesis to lift himself up and reach the state of flight. Although Wu Ming could use mana jet and acceleration to achieve the effect of flight, it was easier to fly with his spirit. After all, Wu Ming had extremely powerful spirit. With just a thought, he could fly without any difficulty. Attila, it's all thanks to you that I can learn so quickly. Wu Ming's words made Attila, whose cheeks were still red, shake his head. Didn't I say that even without me, you can still do it? If that's the case, then I won't say thank you. After all, there's no need to say thank you between real friends. Facing Attila's strength, Wu Ming could only admit defeat. However, Attila was stunned by Wu Ming's words. Friends, at this moment, Attila had an urge to cry. Chapter 549. Obviously, Wu Ming had underestimated Attila's obsession with the word friend. As a result, Attila shed tears of joy in front of Wu Ming. Although Wu Ming could tell that Attila was happy, Wu Ming could only pretend that he did not know. He then began to apologize to make Attila laugh. After all, Wu Ming sympathized with Attila, who had been alone for 14,000 years. However, Attila did not need sympathy. If he sympathized with her, it would be an insult to her. No, it should be said that for anyone who could survive 14,000 years alone and still maintain a gentle character, sympathizing with her was equivalent to insulting her. Therefore, Wu Ming would not sympathize with her. He would only bring her happiness as a friend. As expected, Wu Ming is very gentle. Although Attila said that, he wasn't a fool. Attila had already felt that she was thinking for him. Wu Ming smiled helplessly. As no one had ever treated Attila this way, the warmth that Wu Ming brought to her made her feel extremely gentle. Wu Ming did not think that he was gentle. It was just a necessary concern for a friend. Even if he was really gentle, he would only have feelings for the people he cared about, such as Meiyu and the rest. To Attila, who was a stranger not long ago, Wu Ming was not gentle at all. Although he was sorry, it was the truth. However, Wu Ming believed that as time passed, Wu Ming would be able to treat Attila like how he treated Meiyu and the rest. Wu Ming was just trying his best to talk to her and bring Attila more new things. Without thinking about it, Wu Ming said to Attila, as it was almost time, "It's almost time for me to go." After all, Wu Ming had not completed what he needed to do in the singularity in the United States. The Celtic Holy Grail was still in Maeve's hands, and he had to get it. Moreover, there was still a Holy Grail in Wu Ming's relic space. Wu Ming still had to give it to Chaldea. As for the other Holy Grail, Wu Ming's Sword of Salvation was the carrier of that Holy Grail. After Wu Ming finished speaking, Attila looked slightly lonely. Because I pulled your spiritual body here, the flow rate here is completely different from that singularity. Attila blushed and stuttered as she was afraid that she would anger Wu Ming. When Attila said this, how could Wu Ming not know? Attila just wanted him to stay a little longer and accompany her more. Wu Ming wasn't angry, or rather, it should be said that he shouldn't be angry. After being stunned for a while, Wu Ming smiled. If that's the case, I'll take a break here. After all, this is a rare opportunity to slack off. As Wu Ming spoke, he flew to Attila's lap and lay down again. Attila was not as surprised as she was last time. Instead, she smiled happily. Just like that, Wu Ming and Attila started chatting in the stone room. Although it was called chatting, it was basically Wu Ming talking about his own experiences. Attila was listening, and she would complain about Wu Ming from time to time. Then, she would be teased by Wu Ming. When she realized what was going on, both of them laughed. Then, Wu Ming continued. Attila was lonely. She did not ask for anyone to talk to her. However, she felt very happy to have someone tell her stories. Moreover, this was Wu Ming's story. Attila was very interested in this first friend of hers. After some time, both of them were still in the same mode. One of them was talking, and the other was listening. Suddenly, a hesitant look appeared on Attila's face. Did something happen? Wu Ming immediately noticed Attila's abnormality and asked patiently. "It's almost time," Attila said with a hint of sadness in his voice. Wu Ming had a rough idea of the time he was referring to when it was almost time. It was almost time for Wu Ming's spiritual body to disappear. It made sense. Even if the flow of time here was very different from the other side, it was impossible for Wu Ming to stay here forever. After all, Wu Ming was now a spiritual body. But this was also good. After all, Wu Ming's matter at the singularity was not settled yet. Wu Ming looked at his faintly discernible body, as well as Attila's happy yet lonely eyes, and asked solemnly, "Attila, do you want to go to the outside world? Go to the outside world to see?" Attila obviously did not think about this. She was a weapon left behind. Her only purpose was to wait and dream. At least, that was the case for now. Wu Ming read Attila's thoughts as a weapon from her eyes. I don't think a creature with such gentle emotions is a weapon. If that's the case, then this world is too cruel to you. With that said, Wu Ming subconsciously touched his arm as if he was touching something. Wu Ming thought of Enkidu, who willingly followed him. Back then, Wu Ming did not have the ability to fight against the gods, so he could only retreat strategically. Enkidu's soul willingly turned into Heaven Lock and followed Wu Ming. Although Enkidu kept saying that she was a weapon and eventually turned into a weapon, even so, Wu Ming did not think a person with such gentle emotions was a weapon, even if she was once a weapon and now turned back into a weapon. This principle was the same for Attila. These emotions are just remnants of the previous civilization. I don't have any emotions. With that said, Attila showed a self-deprecating and lonely expression. She slowly lowered her head. I'm just a weapon. I'm the vanguard of the stars. Attila the giant god. Attila lowered her head more and more as she spoke, and her tone became weaker. In the end, Wu Ming could not hear what Attila was saying anymore. Attila was almost burying her head in her chest. Although Attila did not have a chest, cough cough, Wu Ming heard fear in Attila's words. Attila was afraid that Wu Ming would give up on her because of her identity as a weapon. This would cause Attila to lose her only friend. Aren't you looking down on me too much? Wu Ming pretended to be angry. He used his telekinesis to fly up and level with Attila's head. He then used his telekinesis to lift Attila's head. If you think your feelings are so cheap, then I'm really going to be angry. Attila stared at Wu Ming with her big eyes. She did not say anything. Although I've just gotten to know you, Attila, I don't think your feelings are fake. If that's the case, what about our friendship? Wu Ming's words left Attila speechless and dumbfounded. I don't think our feelings are fake. Friendship is not judged by the length of time. Even if it's a short relationship, I think it's your true feelings. Wu Ming said to Attila word by word seriously. Remember, as long as you want freedom, I'll definitely help you. With my original body's ability, I'll definitely be able to free you from here. Wu Ming looked at Attila with firm eyes without a trace of deceit. He spoke his thoughts word by word. Wu Ming did not think that Attila would use her own will to destroy him after being freed, because Attila already had feelings. It was a feeling that was both gentle and pure, strong and tolerant. Wu Ming felt that such Attila was qualified to live in the outside world. Wu Ming, Attila did not know what to say for a moment. Of course, if you're not satisfied, I'll personally capture those wandering stars and let them liberate you and give you freedom. Wu Ming said confidently, giving Attila a feeling of as long as it's him, I'll definitely be able to do it. As the root dragon, Wu Ming naturally had that kind of ability. It was quite difficult now, but when Wu Ming became an adult, it would be very easy. I swear on my identity as the root dragon that as long as you don't give up, our friendship will always exist. Although this was not good for the civilizations that Attila destroyed, the dead were gone. Wu Ming believed that if those good civilizations were still alive, they would definitely forgive such an innocent girl. As for the opinions of those bad civilizations, sorry, so be it if they were destroyed. Thank you, my friend. Attila held Wu Ming in front of her with both hands. Tears flowed down from the corner of her eyes as she smiled happily. Chapter 550. Fifth Singularity, America Continent, a crater near Alexandria. Achilles was driving the chariot, pacing back and forth near the crater, looking extremely frustrated. Sharon and Rama on the chariot were also frowning, but they did not dare to act rashly. Because it was too strange, there was no movement from the bottom of the crater. It had been a few minutes since Wu Ming went down. Although they thought that even Wu Ming would not be able to finish the battle in a few minutes, it was too strange that there was no movement at all. Just then, in their magic perception, the magic power in the crater dissipated. Did we win? Ka Rong used his all-seeing eyes and looked down at the area that had become clear. Then, Sharon saw a black shadow flying toward the top of the crater, but Sharon still could not see who it was. Get ready. Sharon raised his bow. Achilles and Rama nodded their heads and took out their weapons. After all, it would be bad if it was not Wu Ming, but an enemy. First, it would mean that Wu Ming had been defeated, and it was unknown whether he was alive or dead. Second, if even Wu Ming could not defeat an enemy, it would be a dead end for them. As time passed, the figure came up. Fortunately, it was Wu Ming and not an enemy they had never seen before. It's my friend. Looks like he succeeded. Rama looked at the golden cup in Wu Ming's hand and sighed in relief. Why is he carrying a woman up here? Could it be that the strong enemy below is this woman? Achilles also saw the Holy Grail in Wu Ming's hand, but his eyes were sharper. At the same time, he also saw the girl in the same wedding dress as Wu Ming in Wu Ming's arms. At first, Achilles did not see it. After all, both of them were wearing white, and it was too dazzling to see them together. If it were not for the girl's golden hair dancing with the wind, Achilles would have to wait until Wu Ming got closer to see her. Then, Sharon, who was still observing with his eyes wide open, noticed something and immediately cried out. Wait, what else is coming up? Just as Karong finished speaking, a white figure suddenly charged out from behind Wu Ming, or perhaps beneath him, from the giant pit. Dong! The white figure jumped onto the ground at the edge of the crater, stirring up a thick cloud of dust. Soon after, the dust settled, and the newcomer appeared before the eyes of Ka Rong and the rest. It was a white-haired girl. Most of her skin was exposed in her revealing white ethnic attire. Her tan skin was in a healthy state, and she held a tricolored sword in her hand. Her eyes were filled with a strong desire to destroy as she stared at Sharon and the other two. This person was very dangerous. Be it Sharon, Achilles, or Rama, all of them had the same thought. At this moment, Wuming also flew up. Wuming used his telekinesis to control his body and gently landed beside the white-haired girl. Attila, calm down. Wuming gently said to the white-haired girl. After hearing Wuming's words, the white-haired girl nodded without hesitation. The desire in her eyes dissipated, replaced by a dazed look. As for why Attila was so obedient to Wuming, it was because this was a gift from Attila to Wuming, a friend. I can't help you now, so I'll let my clone, my dream, help you, Attila said before Wuming disappeared. Then, Wuming realized that he had obtained a slave who was completely obedient to his orders. Thinking of this, Wuming's face showed a speechless expression. So the so-called help was completely obedient to his orders. Wasn't this the same as a weapon? Not noticing Wuming's subtle expression, after seeing that Attila was no longer a threat, Achilles and Sharon looked at each other and landed. What's going on? What happened to you down there? Sharon walked down from the chariot and came before Wuming, asking in confusion. He could also see that the white-haired girl was no longer an enemy, but the powerful pressure just now still made Sharon worried. Achilles and Rama felt the same. It was as if they were facing their natural enemy. It's like this. Wuming looked at Attila, then put the unconscious blonde girl in wedding dress into Achilles' chariot, and at the same time placed the Holy Grail in the girl's arms, then began to explain. Wuming told Sharon and the others about how he accidentally entered the incomplete inherent enchantment created by the Holy Grail. Wuming did not tell Sharon and the others about his dreamlike trip to the moon's spaceship and his encounter with Attila. It was not that Wuming did not believe that Sharon and the others could not keep a secret, but this matter was not suitable to be told to outsiders. After all, wandering star, giant god, 14,000 years, and so on were too mysterious and complicated. It was better to tell a little lie. This is the Hun King Attila, an old acquaintance and good friend of mine. Then, Wuming explained the origin of Attila in a half-true, half-false manner. Due to Attila's strong desire to destroy, she was sealed by the holder of the Holy Grail in Rome, trapped in the Holy Grail. Due to the appearance and death of the demon god Pillar, Attila's seal was broken, and the magic pillar visible to the naked eye just now was Attila releasing the seal, and entering the incomplete inherent enchantment was also Attila's dream. In any case, Achilles and Rama believed that she was sealed. Just like Berserker's desire to destroy, it made them feel like they were facing a great enemy. The golden-haired girl lying on Achilles' chariot was the sacrifice summoned by the demon god Pillar. After the demon god Pillar was destroyed, the girl reappeared. Because she had the support of the Holy Grail by her side, she did not disappear due to excessive weakness. After that, Wuming brought the blonde girl with the Holy Grail out of the huge pit with Attila. Because Attila used the method of jumping, she reached the ground one step faster than Wuming, who flew up. In short, everything is over. Sharon no longer paid attention to the loopholes in Wuming's words, giving Wuming enough face. After all, Wuming was not good at lying. Even if Achilles and Rama were fooled, as a teacher, Sharon was not fooled, and Teacher Ma was not that naive. Indeed, now that we have the Holy Grail in Maeve's hands, this singularity can be fixed. The four of them heaved a sigh of relief. This singularity was finally over. Let's go back to Chica's side. Achilles drove the chariot, carrying Sharon and Rama, while Wuming and Attila walked on the ground. According to Wuming's words, I want to chat with an old friend. But in reality, Wuming was afraid that Attila would not be used to riding Achilles' chariot, so Wuming felt that it would be better to walk with Attila. And at this moment, a huge amount of magic suddenly condensed in the sky, and a huge circle embedded in the sky appeared in everyone's vision. Immediately, the circle exploded with a powerful magic, and a beam of light descended from the sky, presumably landing at Tachika's place. Chapter 551. Boom! The explosion swept over from Gadatsi's direction, and the resulting hurricane lifted a layer of skin from the surrounding ground. Nay, Achilles' 3 immortal horses were blown by the hurricane and let out a difficult cry. The 3 immortal horses held on for a moment, then dragged the empty chariot and was blown into the sky by the hurricane. Of course, it was not that Achilles and the others were blown away by the wind, but because Achilles and the others got off the chariot before it was blown away. Achilles and Rama lay on the ground, while Sharon held the unconscious blonde girl and hid behind Achilles and Rama. Wooming stood in front of Attila, blocking the hurricane for Attila, and looked at the strange light circle in the sky where the light beam had just been shot. There is no doubt that the explosion and hurricane were caused by the light beam attack. It really is that guy. This is exactly the same as Floro's light beam attack. The guy Wooming was talking about was the Magic King. After all, only that guy could set up a huge light circle in the sky of a singularity and launch such a powerful attack. Floro said that he had obtained the power of the king, and the black light beam shot by the dark light ball gave Wooming the same feeling as the light beam that fell from the sky just now. While Wooming was thinking, in just a few seconds, the hurricane stopped. Wooming shook the dust off his body and looked at Attila. "Are you okay?" Attila, who was not stained by a trace of dust, shook her head in the face of Wooming's concern. "I can do it myself," Attila said coldly. Attila in her servant form was a cold warrior form, which could also be understood as the Three Nothingness. Wooming understood what Attila meant. She was the clone of the giant god Attila, and was not so weak. Even without Wooming, she would not be affected by the hurricane. That being said, I think I did the right thing in protecting my friends. Wooming smiled, then turned away from Attila and walked towards Kar Rome and the others. Attila stared blankly for a moment, as if attracted by Wooming's words. But in an instant, Attila regained her cold and emotionless appearance. However, Attila's gaze remained fixed on Wooming. Wooming walked over to Sharon and helped him up. At the same time, he picked up the golden-haired girl and the Holy Grail. I can only say that he is worthy of being called the Great Sage. Wooming's meaning was simple. Sharon could have given up on the girl and let her be blown away by the hurricane. You think too highly of me. I'm only here for the Holy Grail. Sharon shook his head with a smile. Although that was what he said, he could have taken the Holy Grail away and only protected it. Instead, he chose to protect the girl as well. No matter what, the result will not change. Wooming then looked at Achilles. "Achilles, can you summon your chariot back?" "Of course not," Achilles said unhappily. Of course, Achilles was not unhappy with Wooming, but with the sudden attack. After that, Achilles whistled, and the chariot pulled by the 3 immortal gods flew over from the horizon. Wooming put the girl and the Holy Grail on the chariot and flew up. Sharon, Achilles, Rama. I'll go check the situation first. You guys go with Attila. After that, Wooming sped up and flew in the direction of Gadatsi. Then Achilles and Sharon got on the chariot. "Miss Attila, please come up," Sharon said carefully. Attila did not say anything. She nimbly got on the chariot without any hesitation. However, the owner of the chariot, Achilles, looked at Attila full of fighting spirit. He was very interested in this servant who could make him feel pressure. He glared at Achilles, warning him not to cause trouble, and then looked at Rama. "King Rama, what's wrong with you?" The reason why Sharon asked this was because Rama was in a daze. Rama came back to his senses and looked at Sharon. "Nothing, just a bad premonition suddenly appeared in my heart, as if something is going to happen to Cedo." Then Rama shook his head, no longer thinking about the messy things, and got on the chariot. In this way, Achilles reluctantly pulled the 5 servants and began to move in the direction of Wooming. On Wooming's side, because Wooming used magic to assist his mental power to speed up, and the distance between Wooming and Gadatsi was not far. So in the blink of an eye, Wooming arrived at the original gathering place of Gadatsi and the servants. At this moment, there was nothing left of what was originally a plain. The grass disappeared, the stones were annihilated, the trees were shattered, and there was no trace of it. It could only be judged by the magic of the earth that this used to be a good, fertile land. However, the earth's experience was not good. The earth was directly lifted, revealing a barren yellow color. It could be said that there was nothing but barren land here now. But Wu Ming did not want this to be the case. As if God was on Wu Ming's side, in the barren land, Wu Ming saw a different place from the surrounding. The holy round shield appeared in a place similar to a mound, and then the round shield peeled off the earth, and two figures walked out. Tachika, Matthew. Wu Ming quickly flew over. Is it assassin? Cough, cough, cough. Tachika was excited. Then she ate a mouthful of dust and coughed. Senpai, are you okay? Matthew helped Gadatsi out of the mound and to the clean, flat ground next to it. This made Gadatsi, who had been coughing, feel much better. Cough, cough. I'm really choking to death. Gadatsi had an uncomfortable look on his face. After seeing how lively Gadatsi was, Wu Ming was no longer worried and asked about the other servants. It's good that you're okay. What about the others? When Wu Ming asked, Gadatsi and Matthew both looked sad. Is that so? I understand. Wu Ming nodded. That was an unnecessary question. Under such an attack, the others might have returned to the martyr's palace. It could be said that they were almost wiped out. In the end, if Matthew didn't react and condensed his noble artifact into a point to protect me, I'm afraid I would have. Gadatsi did not continue. So that was the case. Wu Ming pondered. I'm sorry, Senpai Sarand. I really didn't have the confidence to block that attack, so I could only choose to protect Senpai. Matthew lowered his head in guilt. Then, Wu Ming put his hand on Matthew's head. Don't worry, I think they're thinking the same thing. Compared to protecting their dead servants, it's more important to make sure that Tachika is safe. What Wu Ming said was right. When the beam of light was about to hit, all the servants used their strongest noble phantoms to delay the beam of light so that Mashu could use her noble phantoms to protect Gadatsi. It's okay, Matthew. Don't blame yourself. Gadatsi hugged Matthew and comforted him. Son, Senpai, it's very dirty. What Mashu meant was that her body was covered with dust, and she looked like a refugee from slum. It's okay. I like Matthew the most. This is nothing. Gadatsi rubbed her face against Matthew. Senpai, Senpai. Matthew's face instantly turned red. Although I'm sorry to disturb you, I want to say that the crisis may not be over yet. Wu Ming pointed to the light circle in the sky. Chapter 552. Gadatsi and Matthew both followed Wu Ming's finger and looked at the sky. The strange, huge circle was like a circular lamp that was pressed on the huge ceiling in the sky, giving people a very mysterious feeling. Hey, what is that? Gadatsi was obviously shocked. It's never happened before. Matthew also widened his eyes and looked at the huge circle in the sky. Like Gadatsi and Matthew, Wu Ming also stared at the sky. Then, Wu Ming said his guess. If I'm not wrong, it's probably the Magic King's noble phantasm. Hey, Gadatsi and Matthew were both shocked. After all, I don't think anyone else can release that level of attack over the singularity except for that guy. Gadatsi and Matthew looked at each other. It seemed that this was the only possibility. I guess I'm afraid that every singularity has this circle, but the circle was hidden by that guy. It could be said that Wu Ming had not been to the previous singularities, and the only one he had been to was Winterwood City. When he was in Winterwood City, Wu Ming noticed that the sky was slightly different, but he didn't pay much attention to it. When he was in London, because he was underground, he couldn't see the sky, so Wu Ming didn't pay attention to it. At this singularity, Wu Ming noticed the abnormality in the sky. Deliberately hiding it made people notice the abnormality. That guy's move is bad. Wu Ming ridiculed mercilessly. But even so, the other party didn't suffer any losses. The price of exposing this noble phantasm was that almost all the servants were sent back to the Valhalla. Nightingale, Geronimo, Atlanta, Edison, Tamame, Billy Boy, Robin Hood, Elizabeth, Kyoheim, Helena. It could be said that the attack just now had killed those 10 servants. At present, The American continent, which had more than 30 servants in the beginning, was now left with only a dozen servants. Sharon, Achilles, Rama, Attila, and the unconscious Roman girl escaped the attack because they were with Wooming. Because of the duel, Arjona and Karna were located in the northwestern part of the American continent. He reckoned that Aeson and Demetrius, as well as Hercules, who had Wooming filling up the lake, should not have been affected. Maeve and Ceto were sent away by Wooming using the portal. Gadotzi's personal servant, Matthew Gillett, and Wooming, who was currently with Gadotzi. Finally, there was Pamilia, who was sleeping in Riverton. Speaking of this, Wooming was quite helpless and angry. According to Gadotzi, Pamilia said that she would take a nap when it was time for her to sleep. Knowing that their team's mission was only to delay the Romans, Pamilia said that she would take a nap first. Then, there was no then. The vampire was still in Riverton. At least Wooming could be sure that she was not here. But there was no other way. Who would have thought that a simple delay would trigger the appearance of the demon god Pillar? If Pamilia was here before, even if Floros got the power of the Magic King, Wooming estimated that Pamilia would be able to kill Floros if he used his trump card. After all, even if a child was armed with a machete, he would not be able to fight an unarmed Special Forces soldier. No longer thinking about this matter, Wooming began to think about the remaining servants. In addition to Wooming himself, there were a total of 14 servants left, not to mention the strength of the remaining servants. It could be said that if it was an ordinary Holy Grail war, the 14 servants except for Wooming could be said to be enough. However, with only 14 servants, in this American continent, where the magic power had been raised to the level of a god, it was not enough. Not to mention, there was a guy like Aeson, who was useless and only knew how to drive a boat. It could be said that if the halo in the sky did not hide anymore, except for Wooming, the rest of the servants would probably have to leave. Although Matthew could block the attack just now, it did not mean that Matthew could block the rest of the attack. Matthew could block it once, it was already very good. After all, Matthew was still not a mature servant. At present, Matthew was still unable to use Galahad's noble phantasm. Otherwise, there would not be a situation where Matthew could only protect Gadotzi alone. Besides, not everyone would choose to stand on Gadotzi's side. At present, only 7 servants, Wooming, Matthew, Sharon, Achilles, Rama, Attila, and Maeve, could serve as the combat power to protect Gadotzi. Pamilia's whereabouts were unknown. Maybe she had woken up, or maybe she was still sleeping. The Roman girl rescued from the demon god Pillar had been in a coma, and she could not leave the Holy Grail. She could only rely on the Holy Grail to maintain the integrity of her spiritual base. She could not stay too close to Rama, and even if she woke up with her broken spiritual base, she would not have much combat power. As for Arzu and Karna wanted to come back to help Gadotzi, but Arzu was unwilling. It could be said that if Karna chose to help Gadotzi, then Arzu would definitely choose to help the Magus King. In this way, he would be able to fulfill his wish and become enemies with Karna again. Karna, who could not get away, could only accompany Arzu as a sacrifice. Hercules probably had not broken free from the bottom of the lake yet. After all, there were so many fake heavenly locks that were no different from the real heavenly locks. Even Hercules would have to spend a little effort to break them. Of course, unless Wooming personally helped him break them. Aeson and Demetrius. Demetrius would definitely follow Aeson, and with Aeson's character, Wooming didn't expect him to do anything. It could be said that as long as he did not cause trouble, he would be thankful. At this moment, Maeve was not here. Sharon, Achilles, Rama, and Attila were still rushing here. At present, only Wooming and Matthew could protect Gadotzi. After thinking for a while, Wooming waved to Gadotzi. "Gadotzi, come here." Although Gadotzi was puzzled, because of her trust in Wooming, she did not hesitate to walk over. "Give me your hand." After saying that, Wooming stretched out his hand and held Gadotzi's slender little hand. "Hey, what are you doing, assassin?" Gadotzi did not care about shaking hands with Wooming, but Gadotzi did not understand what Wooming wanted to do, and Matthew was the same. Could it be that this was a farewell before death? Just kidding. I'm just giving you my strongest defense. Relax. Then, Wuming did not pay attention to Gadatsi and Matthew. Holding Gadatsi's hand, Wuming closed his eyes. Then, a beautiful scene appeared in front of Matthew's eyes. The holy and invincible armor on Wuming's body, under the effect of Wuming's magic, emitted a dazzling brilliance. Then, the armor automatically disintegrated, and then in a series of light, the armor compressed and transformed into a set of armor similar to that of a woman's. Finally, the armor attached to Gadatsi's body, under the shocked expression on Gadatsi's face, forming a slender and beautiful set of white clothes-fitting armor for a young girl. This made Gadatsi, who still had her hand in Wuming's hand, stunned. Then, an earth-shattering scream resounded through the sky. Ah! Chapter 553. Wah, wah, what is this? A person who was wrapped in clothes-fitting female armor and wearing an elegant dragon-crowned helmet shouted in excitement and surprise. This person was none other than Gadatsi, who was wearing Wu Ming's armor. Say, Senior, are you okay? Matthew stood beside Gadatsi at a loss and asked cautiously. I'm fine. I'm just shocked to put on assassin's armor. Gadatsi's voice came from the seemingly thin, but actually heavy armor. Fortunately, Wuming adjusted the armor and added a lot of adjustment tactics. The specific effect was that Gadatsi, a modern girl without the strength to truss a chicken, could wear such a compressed and heavy armor without changing the quality and defense. After that, Wuming smiled helplessly as he looked at Gadatsi, who was uncomfortable talking to Matthew because of the helmet. Relax. Inject magic. The armor will respond to you. Although Gadatsi was a novice with no experience in magic, after so long, under the guidance of Roman, Olga Marie, and Gadatsi, she could still do the ordinary extraction and application of magic. With that said, as if demonstrating, Wuming put his hand on Gadatsi, and then the helmet on Gadatsi's head split and attached to her shoulders and back. Hey, so simple. Gadatsi was interested, and she used magic with her small face. In an instant, the helmet that was disassembled and disassembled closed again and wrapped Gadatsi's small head. Although Wuming wanted to complain about Gadatsi's constipated expression just now. Then, Gadatsi controlled the helmet to disassemble again, and her excited little head was exposed again. It's really amazing. Then Matthew poked Gadatsi. Senior, now is not the time to play. In an instant, Gadatsi's small face became awkward. Right, assassin. You gave me the armor. What will you do? Gadatsi saw before that the cover that trapped the demon god pillar was made of Wuming's armor. And Gadatsi also saw that the defense wall was not damaged at all under the powerful attacks of Wuming and the demon god pillar. This armor was undoubtedly a super powerful noble artifact. If you don't have this armor, what will you do when the light circle attacks again? Gadatsi said worriedly. Indeed, Wuming, the Berserker Holy King Sealand's strongest noble artifact was this set of armor. With an invincible defense and a light spear that could be strengthened, Wuming could be said to be invincible. Of course, this invincibility only meant that Wuming would not be defeated. It did not mean that he was truly invincible. If Demon God Shouldn't could use the Holy Grail and the blessing of the Sun God to release the power of the sun because Wuming thought it was troublesome, then facing the Demon God Pillar Floros not long ago, Wuming really had no way to kill it with the body of a servant. Although it seemed that Floros was no different from the other Demon God Pillars, Floros said that it had obtained the power of its king. Naturally, it could not be compared to the other Demon God Pillars. However, it was precisely because of this that Wuming borrowed Rama's noble artifact. It's because I'm afraid that the light circle will attack again, so I let you wear this noble artifact. Wuming gently touched Gadatsi's little head and messed up her hair. If it's me, I have it. Wuming turned his head. Following the direction where Wuming turned his head, Gadotsi saw a holy sword that was similar to the Excalibur floating beside Wuming. As if responding to Wuming's words, the divine blade of salvation shone with holy light and attracted lightning. You should know that the best defense is offense. With the divine blade of salvation, nothing will happen to me. But if you don't have this set of armor, it's very likely that something will happen to you. Wu Ming tried to reason with Gadotsi. So be obedient to Chica. In the end, Wu Ming ended with a pampering tone. I know. Gadotsi's cheeks blushed. No matter how good their relationship was after experiencing such gentle flirting, as a girl who has never been in a relationship before, it was quite fatal. Even Ma Shu, who was next to him, was blushing like a braised crab. Wu Ming nodded with satisfaction. Sharon and the others will be here soon. You two remember not to run around. Gadotsi and Matthew nodded. Then, I'll leave for a moment. With that, a dark, purple ripple swallowed Wu Ming, and then the ripple disappeared. Hey, can you hear me? At this time, Gadotsi's wristband sounded. Leader, is the communication device fixed? Gadotsi asked in surprise. However, in response to Gadotsi's inquiry, only the voice was heard and not the image. But the voice was no longer Olga Marie's voice, but Roman's. How could it be fixed? That's magic power comparable to hundreds of holy swords. The explosive magic power directly blew up Chaldea's device. Da Vinci's really tired this time. However, before Roman could finish complaining, Olga Marie's voice was heard again. Get out of my way. After Olga Marie's roar, there was the sound of someone falling to the ground. Then, Olga Marie's calm voice was heard. Speaking of which, under the attack just now, besides you, who else survived? Yes, Assassin is fine. Achilles, Sharon, and Rama, who were with Assassin, are also fine. The attack just now seemed to be directed at us, or rather, it was directed at Senpai, Mashu explained to Olgamai. Is that so? Gadotsi heard Olga Marie's voice and was a little confused. Why did it sound like she was relieved? In fact, Olga Marie wanted to ask for Wuming's comfort, but after all, she was at Sundara, so it was unlikely that she would ask directly. Ahem. In short, Chaldea can only perform simple communication and ray shift for now. It's too dangerous for Tachika and Matthew to continue staying there. Haven't all the enemies been defeated? Let's use ray shift to come back first. This made Gadotsi and Matthew shocked. After all, Gadotsi and Matthew's mission was to repair the singularity. It could be said that the two completely completed the mission in the past few singularities before returning to Chaldea. But this time, Olga Marie proposed to temporarily return to Chaldea. Haven't all the Holy Grails in this singularity been collected? As long as the Holy Grail is taken away from this singularity, it will repair itself. Then Gadotsi smiled awkwardly. Director, have you forgotten? All the recovered Holy Grails are temporarily in Assassin's hands. Matthew also added a fatal blow. And the Celtic Holy Grail is not in the hands of the senior cylinder. It seems to be in the hands of Queen Maeve. In other words, you've been busy in this singularity for half a day, and you haven't gotten a single Holy Grail. Olga Marie's tone was a little strange. Although I'm sorry, Matthew said. But it's true, Gadotsi said. Then, the device on Gadotsi's wrist dimmed, which meant that the other party had cut off the communication. Gadotsi and Matthew looked at each other and smiled helplessly. Chapter 554. A moment later, Gadotsi's bracelet lit up again, but this time the contact was no longer Olga Marie, but Dr. Roman. Roman said that Director Olga Marie was muttering, "How come we didn't get a single Holy Grail? That guy's an idiot. We could have just given the Holy Grail to Chaldea." He cursed as he left the control room. He seemed to have returned to his own room. Will the director be okay? Gadotsi asked worriedly. Don't worry. The director isn't as weak as you think. She's still very strong. Romo's calm and amiable voice was heard. On this point, Roman could be said to have the most right to speak. After all, when Olga Marie became the director, Roman had already been in Chaldea for a long time. It could even be said that Roman was Olga Marie's senior, in a sense. For the time being, Gadotsi and Matthew began to think about what to do next. Then, Doctor, what should we do next? Matthew asked. This question made Roman silent. At present, the 3 Holy Grails were already in the hands of Wooming, and the Celtic Holy Grail was also in the hands of Maeve. It could be said that as long as Wooming went to see Maeve, brought the Holy Grail back, and gave it to Gadotsi, then everything would be solved. So, at present, it seemed that the only thing to do was to wait. In the control room, Roman helplessly scratched his head and then said to Gadotsi on the other side, "Well, let's meet up with Sharon first, then think about what to do next." Roman said weakly, "Okay, Doctor." Then, Gadotsi and Matthew closed the communication and began to walk in the direction where Sharon and the others left to meet up with them. In the control room, the remaining staff members were working nervously. Only now could Roman breathe a sigh of relief. Roman sat down on the chair behind him and leaned back slightly. Magic Kings. Noble artifact. Ha! The 5th singularity, the American continent, Washington's White House. When Wooming sent Cedo and Maeve away using the portal, he had set this place as his destination. After all, this was their base camp. It was much safer than other places. However, in the end, Wooming still miscalculated. Dark purple ripples appeared, and Wooming jumped out of the ripples. Wooming stood firmly on the ground, but what welcomed him was an incomparably huge tentacle. Dong! In an instant, the tentacle slammed heavily on the ground, and the ground caved in because of the huge impact of the tentacle. Immediately afterward, the saber light with lightning struck the tentacle, instantly cutting it off. Wooming stood beside the severed tentacle and brandished his sword. Without a doubt, the tentacle did not hit Wooming. The moment the tentacle fell, Wooming dodged it. Wooming looked at the owner of the tentacle with a serious expression, a huge pillar of flesh that rose into the sky. Demon God Pillar Flawless. That's right, at this moment, in front of Wooming on the White House Square in Washington, the same demon god pillar as Flawless stood there. Wooming had a guess. This demon god pillar Flawless was summoned from the Holy Grail held by Maeve. The evidence was Maeve, who was embedded in the flesh wall of the demon god pillar, with only half of her body exposed. At this moment, Maeve's body was drooping, and she was obviously unconscious. As for Cedo, who was already unconscious and brought back by Maeve, Wooming, who had already spread out his mental power, indicated that he did not find him. Wooming estimated that Cedo was either swallowed by the demon god pillar and was in the body of the demon god pillar, or had been killed by the demon god pillar and returned to the martyr's palace. At this moment, Flawless, who failed the sneak attack, spoke. "You can really find this place, Dragon of Origin." It was still Lev's voice, and it was still an unpleasant voice. Demon god pillars are all as disgusting as cockroaches. This is really an eye-opener. Wooming mocked mercilessly. Although Wooming also knew that to kill the demon god pillar, he had to kill all 72 of them at once, but he could resurrect immediately after dying together. This was a bit of a bug. Of course, an ordinary demon god pillar that appears at a singularity can't do it, but I have the king's blessing. Of course, such a thing can be done. As long as there was the Holy Grail and the sacrifice, Flawless could appear on his own. This was the reason why Flawless suddenly appeared in Alexandria, and the reason why he could resurrect in the White House after dying. But I didn't expect you to put the Holy Grail in the hands of this servant. I thought you had already put it away. But this is good. If not, I won't be able to appear again. Ha ha! The demon god pillar laughed and shook his body. Maeve, who was embedded in the body of the demon god pillar, also shook along with the demon god pillar. Then, Maeve was shaken awake. Maeve, who had just woken up, was still not completely awake. She was a little confused about the current situation. "Maeve, are you okay?" Wooming immediately shouted at Maeve after seeing Maeve wake up. Wooming's shout woke Maeve up, but also made Maeve quite unhappy. "Really, little sigh, can't you pretend that you don't care about me? This way this guy can threaten you." Maeve was like a young girl, looking at Wooming with a puffed-up face expressing her dissatisfaction. Maeve and Cedo were originally here, but for some reason, Maeve's Holy Grail had an abnormality. It directly used Maeve and Cedo's body as a sacrifice to summon the demon god pillar. Because Cedo's spiritual base was damaged, she was equivalent to half a servant. So Maeve acted as the other half and was embedded in the demon god pillar. Before her magic was absorbed, Maeve heard the voice of the demon god pillar. That was what Flawless said at that time. "Ha! I'm back. Wait for your death, Wooming." Then Maeve fainted. Wooming told Maeve his real name. So, according to Maeve's own judgment, she knew one thing. That was Flawless was Wooming's enemy. So Maeve originally wanted to pretend that she didn't know Wooming, in case Flawless threatened Wooming with her. "But you directly call my name. Isn't this telling it that I'm very important to you?" Although she was complaining, Maeve was smiling. That was joy. It was impossible for Wooming not to know this, but Wooming still called Maeve, exposing their relationship and giving Flawless an opportunity. Because Wooming was worried about Maeve, it was impossible for him to not recognize Maeve because of threats. Even if I did that, Flawless wouldn't be fooled. After all, Flawless had said before that since Wooming came to this singularity, Flawless had been monitoring Wooming. Perhaps Flawless already knew about the relationship between Wooming and Maeve, and revealing half of Maeve's body was probably premeditated. That's right. It's because I know about your relationship that I devoured the guy whose spiritual base was about to die in this woman. In this way, I can expose her outside and use it to threaten you. Dragon of origin Wooming. Facing such a situation, Wooming's hand holding the divine blade of salvation couldn't help but tighten. Trouble. Chapter 555. Wooming, who was being threatened, did not dare to unleash the light cannon attack of the divine blade of salvation on Flawless, because it would directly send Maeve and Flawless away. Therefore, Wooming could only suppress the power of the divine blade of salvation and deal with the demon god pillar with just a slash. Swish! A slash mixed with lightning and holy light instantly cut off many of the tentacles that were attacking him. Even the body of the demon god pillar was slashed by the flash of the blade. However, the self-healing ability of the demon god pillar that had obtained greater power was even more powerful. In just a few seconds, the cracked body healed and the tentacles grew out. However, it could be seen that even if the power was deliberately suppressed, the divine blade of salvation was still the divine blade of salvation. The holy sword that could split a star was not just for show. It could be said that the divine blade of salvation could not only be classified as a divine blade of salvation, but also as a divine blade of salvation. Such a powerful divine weapon, even if the power was suppressed, was still not something that the demon god pillar could resist. Originally, it should have been like that. However, because Flawless had obtained the power of their king, his strength had also increased by a level. This created a very awkward situation. Flawless could not hurt Wooming, and Wooming could not do anything to the demon god pillar, even if he showed mercy. For example, the original divine blade of salvation that Wooming used had a strength of 100. Currently, the divine blade of salvation that was transformed from the Holy Grail and Rama's divine blade of salvation had a strength of 80. Due to the deliberate suppression, the strength was reduced to 50. The original strength of the demon god pillar, Flawless, was 30. After obtaining the power of the Magic King, the strength became 50. In this way, the two of them were equal. However, the pure data was only used as a general reference. It could not accurately express anything. It only meant that the two of them were unable to defeat each other. As expected, even after obtaining the power of our king, it is still too weak when facing the Dragon of Origin, Flawless said calmly. Indeed, as the king of Flawless had said, there was nothing to be afraid of with an immature Dragon of Origin. Even though Wooming was very powerful in the eyes of many people, he paled in comparison to the Magic King who had obtained the power of the Black Soil. It was true that an adult origin dragon would possess unparalleled power. It could travel through time, move mountains and fill seas, reverse time, and even bring the dead back to life. However, the prerequisite was that Wuming had to stay inside the origin and use its power. That was because the root dragon was a unique creature that was neither human, beast, nor god that was born from the world root that gave birth to all worlds, which was why it had to borrow the power of the root to achieve invincibility. Although it was called the origin dragon and had the appearance of a dragon, the origin dragon wasn't actually a dragon. The reason Wuming had the characteristics and drawbacks of a dragon was because Wuming's birthplace had shifted from the great origin to the origin of the M-shaped moon. To put it simply, he was tainted with an impure bloodline. However, Wuming had already been baptized inside the great origin and had basically eliminated the drawbacks of dragons. It could be said that as long as Wuming continued to be baptized by the great origin, he would return to the purest form of the origin dragon. After that, as long as he went through the baptism of the great origin, an adult origin dragon could be said to be truly invincible. For now, as long as Wuming stayed inside the great origin, he would be invincible inside. For now, Wuming couldn't interfere with other worlds for the time being. Moreover, as long as Wuming left the great origin, Wuming's chances of losing against someone like the Magic King, who could be said to be a cheat, were definitely higher than his chances of winning against him. In other words, Wuming could only rely on his own power as a dragon of origin. He couldn't threaten anyone else at all, whether it was Darius, Romo, Arthas, or even the Magic King. Wuming couldn't defeat any of them. However, Wuming himself knew this, which was why Wuming had resorted to using external objects. In the past, the queen of the demonic realm, Skaha, who had great wisdom, had also noticed this drawback of Wuming's. That was why she had let Wuming use the process of sublimation to obtain a noble artifact. The true strength of a servant wasn't their martial arts or anything else, but their noble artifacts, which were killer moves that could instantly turn the situation around. Not only that, but there were also many treasures that had rather miraculous functions, such as resurrecting the dead and reversing time, and so on. All in all, since one's body was weak, one should use powerful weapons. That was how humans had developed. There was no reason why a higher-level species like humans couldn't understand this principle. And that was what Wuming did. In the beginning, Wuming's sublimation was very difficult, and it required a lot of effort. Now, that Wuming had the power of origin, it was no longer so strenuous for him. He could easily sublimate items or abilities into a noble artifact. However, Wuming would not casually turn a weapon into a noble artifact. After all, even if he really turned a stone into a noble artifact, it would be the lowest grade of grading noble artifact. It wasn't that he couldn't upgrade it, but he didn't know how long it would take. Then, the ordinary stone would become a divine stone. Therefore, if possible, Wuming would not simply obtain a noble artifact. In fact, Wuming did not deliberately obtain a noble artifact. For example, the Divine Blade of Salvation. That was the artifact that Wuming obtained after defeating Rama, who was the last hope, and inheriting the identity of the last king through trickery. Even if the Sword of Salvation in Wuming's hand was a weakened version of the Holy Sword, its power was not something that Flawless could block. As it had experienced this personally, Flawless did not completely devour Maeve to threaten Wuming. However, Flawless knew that it would lose if it kept defending. Therefore, it was ready to make peace. Forget it, Dragon of Origin. My purpose is just to see Chaldea and the rest. In fact, I don't have the intention to fight you at all. Flawless' tentacles stopped dancing as if they were still in the air. The devil mist and the heat rays in its eyes dissipated. It seemed like it was really ready to make peace. As long as you promise not to interfere with the singularity anymore, I'll let this woman go and allow you to help Chaldea repair the singularity. What do you think? After hearing what Flawless said, Wuming slowly lowered the Sword of Salvation. The lightning and holy light on the blade gradually disappeared. Then, Wuming let out a long sigh of relief. Sure enough, Flawless, even though we've had a lot of dealings, you still don't know me well. Chapter 556. What do you mean? Flawless was confused. You care about her a lot, don't you? I just need you to stop interfering with the next singularity to save her. Isn't that a good deal? Flawlow's voice was like a devil's as he continued to tempt Wooming. Ha! Wooming lowered his head and laughed. It was a mocking laugh. I won't say much nonsense. Let's put it simply. I can't compromise with you, Flawless. Wasn't that a given? For example, if someone stole something from you and made a deal with you, and it was a deal that wasn't beneficial to you, most people wouldn't agree to it. But I'm threatening you, Lord Dragon of Origin, Flawless said with a smile. Although he couldn't see the smile on the giant meat pillar, Wooming could feel that Flawless was smiling. Moreover, Flawless was right. Wooming was being threatened by Flawless at that moment. If he couldn't get rid of this threat, Wooming would always be controlled by others. Wooming frowned and held the Savior Divine sword tightly. At that moment, Wooming was quite upset. Ah, Shao Sai, you don't have to be threatened by this guy for me. Do what you want to do. Maeve smiled and the command spell hidden under the white silk gloves disappeared. Feeling the magical power invading his body, Wooming's heart skipped a beat. Maeve was using the command spell. Fortunately, Wooming had the ability to resist the command spell. Traveler, A+, the effect was equivalent to a solo, A+, and it could greatly resist the command spell of the master. Wooming was able to withstand the power of the command incantation without any pressure. However, that was only the power of the command spell. If it were 2 strokes, it wouldn't be so easy. Shao Sai, use your strongest attack relic on me with all your might. Bang! This was the sound of Wooming's other hand suddenly landing on the Sword of Salvation. Wooming held the Savior Divine sword with both hands and looked up at Maeve. Maeve, don't do anything stupid. Flawless also realized that something was wrong. He quickly used his tentacles to wrap Maeve up and prevent her from eating Wooming. However, it was too late for Flawless. Finally, love me with all your might, my lover, Surrender. Maeve smiled as she looked at Wooming lovingly. The last command incantation was used by my Fu. At this moment, Wooming and my Fu no longer had a master-slave relationship, but a pure relationship between a young girl and her lover. Afterwards, my Fu was wrapped up by the tentacles of the demon god pillar and fused into the demon god pillar. Wait a minute. Don't come over. Flawless shouted in fear. Excalibur. The third command spell allowed Wooming to unleash his strongest attack. Boundless white holy light, mixed with sacred golden lightning, formed a cannon of light that was like a heavenly punishment covering the White House. Facing Wooming's Savior Divine sword, Flawless fell into silence and gave up struggling. It was not only because Flawless knew that he could not block it, but also because he was thinking. Even Flawless did not expect Maeve to be so determined to let her lover kill him. Perhaps this was the pride of being a hero and a heroic spirit. Then Flawless lost consciousness. After the white light, the White House no longer existed. North of Washington, north of the Appalachian Mountains, there was a huge gully that connected to the Arctic Ocean. Endless seawater poured in as if it was reflecting someone's anger. The holy light and lightning were still rippling in the seawater. Wooming's attack directly cut the continent in half. The energy impact of the Savior Divine sword was not something that could be blocked by a singularity. After all, the power to split a star was not fake. If it weren't for Wooming releasing his own attack and weakening the command spell's effect, perhaps the entire singularity would be shattered in the end. With his eyes closed, Wooming took a long breath. Although the servants were the avatars of the heroic spirits, it was still a bit uncomfortable for Wooming to kill the lover he had just accepted. Wooming had never treated the lives of the servants as lives. This was the same as Gadotsi and Matthew. They would not ignore the life and death of the Singularity residents, even if Gadotsi knew that they would be repaired by history. Although this was a lie, it could be seen that Gadotsi and Matthew's hearts were noble. No, it should be said that that was what humans should be. At least, Wu-ming believed that this was what a human was, a real human. Although Wu-ming was not a human, it did not prevent Wu-ming from having the precious character of a human. Maeve. Wu-ming said Maeve's name with a little sadness. From this, it could be seen how deep Maeve's love for Wu-ming was. Without hesitation, she used the command spell to force Wu-ming to kill her along with the demon god Pillar. Even if she was just an avatar, who would want to be killed by the person she loved? This courage, this persistence, this dedication completely explained that even if Maeve was in the ranks of the anti-hero, she also had the pride of a hero. Then, let's meet again in the future, my Fu. Wu-ming said softly to the original demon god Pillar, as if he was whispering to it. Then, Wu-ming walked over. As the sacrifice to summon the demon god Pillar, the servant had an advantage. That was, no matter how powerful the demon god Pillar was, how fierce the attack was, the servant as the sacrifice would always be safe. However, after the demon god Pillar disappeared, the servant as the sacrifice would withdraw in a short time, as if their spiritual base and magic power had been drained. This was the case with G of Justice, and the blonde Roman girl, because of the protection of the Holy Grail, did not directly withdraw. So this time, the servant as the sacrifice of the demon god Pillar would be the same. It would definitely withdraw in a very short time. Wu-ming walked to Sito's side. Sito's spiritual base was about to be broken, and at this moment, his body was already faintly discernible. It could be said that at this moment, if not for the protection of the Celtic Holy Grail that fell after Floros withdrew, Sito would have already left. As far as the current situation was concerned, once the Holy Grail left Sito, Sito would immediately disappear. Now, the Holy Grail was just hanging on to Sito's last breath. However, fortunately, there was the Holy Grail hanging on to Sito's last breath. In this way, Wu-ming was confident that he could save Sito. Wu-ming suddenly had a guess. Let's give it a try. With that, Wu-ming took out another Greek Holy Grail that he obtained from Ison in his protective shell space, and together with the Celtic Holy Grail, he placed it on Sito's body that was about to dissipate. The light of the Greek Holy Grail appeared and began to cooperate with the Celtic Holy Grail to nourish Sito's spiritual base. Immediately afterward, Wu-ming stretched out his two hands, placed them on the two Holy Grails, and began to inject magic power into the Holy Grail. At this moment, the halo in the sky changed, and a beam of light fell in the direction of. Where is Tachika and the others? Chapter 557. In just an instant, the light beam shot by the aperture landed near Alexandria. That direction was definitely the direction of Gadatsi and the others. Wu-ming was willing to bet. However, Wu-ming did not do anything else and continued to infuse magic into the two Holy Grails. Fortunately, Wu-ming was cautious and had already given the invincible armor that was comparable to Avalon's time to Gadatsi. Therefore, Wu-ming was not worried about the safety of Gadatsi and the others. Why was he not worried about the safety of Gadatsi and the others? That was because Wu-ming had already infused a lot of magic into his precious armor in advance. In the face of danger, it would automatically decompose and form a protective shield. Dong! Ignoring the explosion behind him that was even more intense than the light beam shot by the aperture, Wu-ming focused on healing Sito. The miraculous power of the two Holy Grails and Wu-ming's almost infinite magic was like a good car with good fuel. The effect of 1 + 1 was far greater than 2. After a while, Sito slowly opened her eyes. You are. Sito looked at the young man who was filled with holy light in front of her in confusion. I'm Rama's friend. I was asked by Rama to come and save you. Wu-ming smiled slightly. Sito was asked by Rama to come. This was not a lie, but it was not true either. It could be considered half true and half false. After all, Wu-ming would not be stingy with his power if he could help this couple improve their relationship. Thank you. Although Sito was still weak, she still chose to believe in Wu-ming. Wu-Ming's eyes told Sito that he was not lying to her. Moreover, feeling her spiritual base gradually recovering, Sito also believed that Wu-Ming was here to save her. Miss Sito, may I ask what your last memory is? I need to know how long you were unconscious. While her body was being healed by the Holy Grail, Sito recalled for a while and then answered Wu-Ming. I remember that my last memory was talking to that unbelievably beautiful big sister, talking to her about her lover. Sito's face gradually turned red as she talked about her girlish thoughts. The lover that Miss Sito was talking about is Rama, right? Wu-Ming said softly. Yes, yes. Sito's voice became softer. He was obviously embarrassed. You two are so loving. I'm so envious. The more Wu-Ming spoke, the redder Sito's face became. Wu-Ming even suspected that when Sito's face became red to a certain extent, his blood vessels would burst or something. No longer teasing Sito, Wu-Ming asked a serious question. Then, who is the lover that the beautiful woman was talking to you about? It was not that Wu-Ming suspected Mai Fu. He knew that Mai Fu must be talking about him. Therefore, Wu-Ming wanted to know how Mai Fu talked about him and how she loved him. That beautiful big sister Mai Fu. She told me that her lover was a hero that did not lose to Lord Rama. Wu-Ming could not help but smile helplessly. This Mai Fu actually called Sito her sister. He saved me when I needed him. After saving the damsel in distress, he did not want to take responsibility. His temperament was volatile, and he could not stay in the same place. However, he was willing to start a war for me. He did not fall for my beauty, but he was able to treat me like family. He was clearly moved, but he still held it in, and in the end, he really left. Sito muttered the words that Mai Fu said when she talked to her. I was so perfect. There were so many men pursuing me, and all of them fell at my feet, but he didn't move at all. I even fell deeply in love with him. It may sound funny, but I still kept my first time for him. Hearing this sentence, Wu-Ming was stunned. In his mind, he could not help but think of Mai Fu's sly and slightly blushing face. Although Wu-Ming had guessed it, but in front of such a sentence, Wu-Ming could not help but be surprised. Wu-Ming knew about Queen Mai Fu's promiscuous love before he came to this world. Wu-Ming guessed that Mai Fu in this world should also be like that. However, because Wu-Ming met Mai Fu when she just came out of her ivory tower, and until Mai Fu died after Wu-Ming left, Wu-Ming did not see Mai Fu having intimate contact with any man except himself. In other words, Mai Fu was indeed a pure girl. Nature would be suppressed by a stronger desire, and Wu-Ming was Mai Fu's stronger desire. Not noticing Wu-Ming's abnormality, Sito continued. However, I'm really happy that he was able to accompany me for such a long time. Even if he left and I was attacked by death, I still love him. I hope that he can accept me and not leave me to travel alone. From the looks of it, my years of strategy have finally paid off. Sito's cheeks blushed. It seemed that imitating Mai Fu's tone was a great test for her. After hearing this sentence, Wu-Ming smiled helplessly and satisfactorily. Wu-Ming suspected that Mai Fu deliberately let Sito say these words to him. However, Mai Fu did not lie, and this was what Wu-Ming was satisfied with. Although Wu-Ming did not stop the movement of transferring magic power, he did not speak and quietly waited for Sito to continue. However, Sito did not continue and changed the topic. That, Lord Saran, the person Sister Mai Fu was talking about is you, right? Wu-Ming didn't say his name, so for Sito to know, it was most likely Maeve who told Sito Wu-Ming's name. She also told Sito about her lover, Wu-Ming, in this singularity and even his appearance. Wu-Ming smiled helplessly and then asked Sito, since you know that I'm Saran, you must also know that Mai Fu and I are the leaders of the forces that captured you. Don't you hate us? After all, everyone makes mistakes, and now it was you and Sister Mai Fu who saved me and saved me from being used as a sacrifice by the Greek forces. Although Sito was still used as a sacrifice by Floros, well, take this as my apology to you. Wu-Ming nodded and did not persist on this point. That, Lord Saran, Sister Mai Fu also asked me to tell you something. Wu-Ming looked at Sito in confusion. Then Cedo spoke. Sister Mai Fu said that she will wait for you at the Martyr's Palace, no matter how long it takes. After that, Wu Ming was stunned. Then, Wu Ming nodded. I've received the message. Thank you, Miss Cedo. That, you don't have to use honorifics, just call me Cedo. After all, Lord Saran and Lord Rama are good friends. Wu Ming nodded. Speaking of which, you and Rama are really in love. No wonder he asked me to save you. Then, Cedo went silent for a few seconds. There's no such thing. I'm sorry, Lord Rama. Cedo's voice was extremely soft. If it were not for Wu Ming's good hearing, he might not have heard Cedo's words. Actually, Rama is the same as you. Cedo widened her eyes. One night, Rama was worried about you and had a heart-to-heart talk with me. He told me that he was sorry. Of course, it was a lie. Rama did not have a heart-to-heart talk with Wu Ming. But Wu Ming, who understood Rama's heart, could naturally infer Rama's love for Cedo. In order to let Cedo prove his innocence, Rama forced Cedo to commit suicide, which made Rama feel guilty. It was also because of this that Rama appeared in the form of a young king. According to Rama's words, it was only at this time I was the Rama who would do anything for Cedo. I was the husband that Cedo needed, the Rama who loved her deeply. He repeated the words of Rama to Siddhartha. As a result, Siddhartha, whose face was originally flushed red, began to shed tears. Lord Rama, Cedo murmured softly. Then, Cedo looked at Wu Ming. Lord Sarander, please agree to my request. Help me pass on a message to Lord Rama. However, before Cedo could finish, Wu Ming interrupted him. No need. So, if you want to say it, you can say it yourself. Now, you and Rama can meet. Hey. Chapter 558. Wu Ming's words stunned Cedo. Then, Wu Ming did not explain too much to the shocked Cedo. You should go and experience it for yourself. After that, Wu Ming brought Cedo, whose spirit base had been repaired, to Alexandria through the teleportation door and found Rama. Then, Rama and Cedo were surprised. After all, as long as the two of them were too close, one of them would gradually weaken until one of them disappeared. In the end, the two of them who gradually got closer found that the two of them did not show any signs of fainting or even disappearing. Cedo, my Cedo. Lord Rama. Rama and Cedo hugged each other. Everyone consciously did not disturb the couple who could never meet each other. Instead, they made space for Rama and Cedo. Wu Ming and the others walked to the side. Facing the doubts of everyone about the attack that could split half the continent, Wu Ming explained what happened just now. Is that so? I didn't expect the queen to sacrifice herself. Matthew said sadly. For our little eggplant, sacrificing anyone was worth feeling sad. No, it should be said that Matthew would feel sad involuntarily. However, I didn't expect you to break the curse. Gadatsi's wrist made a sound. Director, is it fixed again? It's so fast this time. Gadatsi made a sound of surprise. The voice from the terminal on Gadatsi's wrist was naturally Olga Marie's voice. Then, Olga Marie's virtual projection appeared. Although he did not know the truth, Wu Ming could more or less guess. The light beam attack just now once again cut off the connection with Chaldea. Now, it seemed that Da Vinci, who was in charge of repairing it, had become more familiar with it. Or it could be said that the communication device gradually became more advanced and only needed a simple repair. Let's not talk about this first. I also heard my servant just now. Then, is it possible that such a situation will happen again? Olga Marie was referring to the nature demon god pillar that automatically appeared with the help of the Holy Grail and the servant. If such a Holy Grail was taken to Chaldea, it was better to be safe than sorry. If a demon god pillar appeared, the fragile Chaldea would be destroyed directly. After all, Chaldea's instruments were just some things that were not very sturdy for servant-level people. If the demon god pillar appeared, they would be done for. You don't have to worry about that. The Celtic Holy Grail and the Greek Holy Grail have already been purified by me with a large amount of mana. There's no possibility of summoning the demon god pillar anymore. As for the Roman Holy Grail, I can do the same to eliminate the threat. As for the Japanese Holy Grail, as for the Holy Grail, as for the Holy Grail. What's wrong, assassin? Gadotsi looked at silent in confusion. The Holy Grail of the Japanese forces has been made into my noble phantasm. Wu Ming scratched his head awkwardly and extended the sword of salvation in front of everyone. Not only Olga Marie, Gadotsi, and Matthew, but even Achilles and Sharon were stunned, turning the Holy Grail that the servants fought for into his own weapon. It was estimated that only Wu Ming could do such a thing. Of course, I will not take it away. I will give it to you. This time, everyone was collectively stunned. The servants' noble phantoms were condensed by magic power. It could be said that after the servant left, the noble phantoms could not be preserved. But listening to Wu Ming's words, it did not seem like he wanted to keep it. This is a noble phantoms made with the Holy Grail as the raw material. Naturally, it can be preserved. Wu Ming explained very considerately. Indeed, if it is a noble phantoms made with the Holy Grail as the raw material, it is possible to leave the servant's body. As a scholar, Sharon strictly explained to everyone. He was even more certain that Wu Ming's words were correct. By the way, the attack just now did not cause any harm to you, right? Wu Ming looked at Gadotsi. We are completely fine. Gadotsi, who was wearing her armor, excitedly hugged Wu Ming's arm and shook it. Looking at Gadotsi's cheerful personality, as a teacher, Sharon also smiled. Because of her noble phantoms, the enemy's attack was completely blocked. Not only us, but even the surrounding land was unharmed. I can only say that it is great that this land was not ravaged again. Roman, who was in the corner of Olga Marie's projection, said weakly, I have to say, even if I have an immortal body, I can't block it. Achilles carried his gun with both hands and looked unhappy. That's why I taught you not to be too arrogant, Achilles. Sharon once again became a teacher. Yes, I understand. Looking at everyone chatting, Matthew felt very warm, but Matthew noticed that Wu Ming was thinking about something. That, Senpai Cylinder, are you thinking about something? When Matthew said this, Gadotsi and the others also looked at Wu Ming. Wu Ming looked at everyone, then said what he was thinking. Well, for the attack just now, I don't think it was released by Floros before he died. Wu Ming's words made everyone feel a sense of crisis. Do you mean that it was released by the Magic King himself? Olga Marie said with some uncertainty. Looking at the slightly embarrassed Roman, Wu Ming said, After all, that's the Magic King's noble phantasm. It's not strange for the Magic King to use it himself. However, because the intensity of the light beam was similar to the one released by Floros, everyone thought that it was released by Floros before he died. But as the one who killed Floros, Wu Ming knew that the light beam was released after Floros left the stage. In short, I will go look for him later, Wu Ming said calmly. Then, the scene fell into silence. Only Sharon and Achilles. One of them looked helpless, and the other crossed his arms in front of his chest. There was also Attila, who had been standing beside Wu Ming without any unnecessary actions or words since he came back. Other than Achilles and Sharon, everyone else cried out in shock. Wait a minute, Cylinder. Are you going to look for the Magic King directly? Roman's face instantly appeared on the virtual projection screen. Go away. Olga Marie pushed Roman away. You're not really going to look for the Magic King directly, are you? Olga Marie looked worried. Directly looking for the Magic King or something, as expected, is still a little rushed. Gadotsi smiled with a helpless expression. Senior Cylinder, that's too dangerous. Matthew looked at Wu Ming with a serious face. Looking at everyone trying to persuade him, Wu Ming was helpless. Don't think that I'm too weak. After all, I'm someone with a special identity. After Wu Ming said that, Gadotsi, Matthew, and Olga Marie remembered that Wu Ming had fought the Magic King in the underground of the Fourth Singularity. Who exactly was he? In an instant, this question filled the minds of Gadotsi, Matthew, and Olga Marie. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and Don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.